Mayor Johansson,
Yes.
can I have an opportunity to introduce our new deputy corporate officer to council as well?
When would you do
Whenever you want to let me do it.
that? Okay.
Hey, Doug.
I'll surprise you.
Okay, just made you a little bit louder.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, thanks.
It's got a 30-second delay on it. Yeah. So just minimize that. It's volume's down on it too. Okay.
Made you a little bit
We've
louder.
had that feedback.
Hey, Matt, Diane,
What?
question, guys.
Yeah? Hey, Doug.
If you do the webcasting on this computer, I'm gonna hear all the background and I'm gonna hear feedback. Can you do the webcasting on the other computer?
No, sorry.
You can't do the webcasting on the other computer?
Can you turn your volume down?
I can, if you, wait one second, let me turn my volume down.
I advertise it later.
See, we can hear each other very well in the feedback from each other. That's good.
Okay, I got an idea.
Nice haircut, Devin.
Sorry?
Nice haircut.
Oh, thank you. I wanted to look good for you guys, you know?
Oh, you said it was for us.
It's more the corporate banker look, I think.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Okay.
He has no facial hair either, if you notice.
A shave.
That worked. Whatever you did, that worked. Thanks, Matt.
Okay, good.
We're ready to go.
You did the YouTube stream.
Oh,
So we just minimize, yeah. Good.
are we?
Yes.
I'd like to call this meeting to order, a special open meeting of council, November 20th, 2018. At this time, I'd like to ask CAO if there's any late items to add to the agenda.
Thank you, Your Worship. No, there are no late items to be added to the agenda.
Seeing no late items added to the agenda, motion to adopt the agenda. Councilor Mattis, call the question. Councilor Faber, motion carried. No items under new business arising from prior meetings, committee reports for this meeting to be received. Before we start with water matters, I'll give CAO opportunity to introduce a new corporate officer.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to take this opportunity to introduce to you our Deputy Corporate Officer, Matt Saunders. He's taking Linda Schultz's position. She has retired after 18 years, as you're all well aware of it. And Matt actually started off as our utility technician, and he's very interested in expanding his knowledge in local government and becoming a part of it. So he's a great addition to the administration department.
Thank you. Pleasure to meet everybody.
Moving to water matters, 2019 5-year financial plan for water budgets. Refer this matter to the CEO.
Thank you, Your Worship. As you're aware, the purpose of the report in front of you is to provide council with the draft 2019 water operating and capital budgets prepared in accordance with council's zero-based budgeting direction. At this time, I will pass it over to Mr. Wanup so that he can take council through the report that he's prepared. And Mr. Goodsoe, the Director of Operations, is also here to provide any answers to questions with regards to some of the projects.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. So, as new council, I'd like to congratulate you on this first budget process. I know it's going to be a very invigorating one for you. So, what I'd like to start with is sort of my approach to the budget and how I want to ensure that the town of Oliver is sustainable in the years to come. So I have a three-pronged approach when I'm looking at our budgets, our water, our sewer, and our general budget. So for each of them, I want to ensure that we're looking, so this is on the bottom of page 4. So I want you to look at the operating last year, actual last year. And do we need to do anything to ensure that our operation is going to be able to maintain the same level of service that we have been able to maintain this past couple of years? Is everyone able to hear me good? Everyone's good?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. The next one would be the capital funding envelope. So when we're looking at capital projects, so capital projects are projects that are essentially one line item per budget. So not per budget, but per project. So each project has its own line item, and each project has to be funded separately, and you have to show how it's financed, and if any of the individual capital budgets go over, or any of the line items go over, we have to have a council resolution for that overage. So where the operating, there's some flexibility where if you're over on one line item, as long as the overall budget is good, you don't need to come back for a council resolution. But on a capital project, because it's a line by line approval for your capital budget, you need to ensure that making sure that you're funding those projects going forward. So this is essentially how I look at this capital funding envelope is what we're taking out of our capital reserves on a 5-year average, and then on a 5-year average, what are we putting into our capital reserves? And then we look at the deficiency. So if we're taking out significantly more than what we're putting in, obviously that's not very sustainable, and we're going to have to look at other means of being able to finance our capital projects in the future. And then the last one, so the third problem in the effect is the future debt obligation. So obviously one of the ways that you can fund capital purchases is through debt. And when you have debt, that's a new expense of both interest and principal payments that have to be funded because you can't have a cash deficiency in a municipal budget. So when you look at that, obviously there's going to be an increase in payments. With those increasing payments, obviously you'll have to either cut back services or increase rates in this case, or property taxes to be able to fund those additional expenses. So you look at that over a 5-year period, and if you're going to be taking out money, you obviously don't want to have a big jump in the year that it happens. You want to be able to smooth it out so that there's not a huge spike in the year that we have to start making that loan payment. So that's sort of my approach to the budgets, to ensure that each of those 3 items are looked at and planned for and taken care of essentially. And so I'm going to be walking you through the operational budget first, and if you have any questions, please just speak up when you have them. I think that is probably the better flow. I'm going to be going through a lot of information, and if you have any burning questions now that you'd like me to answer on the water budget, I can definitely answer them, but if not, I'll just continue my presentation.
Any questions?
Let him go.
Let's go.
I got lots of
Okay.
questions, but you might answer them as you go.
So, sorry, did he say we're good?
Yes.
Yeah, we're
Yes,
good,
good,
Kevin.
yeah.
I got lots of
Okay.
questions, but you might answer
Sorry.
them.
Rick, I can't, sorry, Councilor Michelle, I can't hear you that well. I'm not sure why.
Well, we'll test it right now. I just said, Devin, that I've got a lot of questions, but you might answer them.
Okay.
You might answer
Yep.
them as you're going through your presentation anyway, so go ahead.
Perfect, I can hear you good now. That's awesome. So, back in 2017, so this is obviously before some of your term, this is before your term started, but back in 2017, in 2016 actually is when the Gallagher Lake siphon was damaged due to that water slide, and because of that, council made a resolution, as you see on page 4. So on the smart board, I don't know if you can see my hand moving around the rates here. Yes?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So in 2017, we increased rates by 3% to start putting away money towards this Gallagher siphon repair. 2018, we did the same thing, and then we had on schedule for 2019 as a 2%, 2022 as a 2%, and 2021 for a 2%. So that is just to keep in mind with what we're looking to do, obviously the Gallagher Lake siphon repair is the largest capital project that we are going to have to try and fund in the near future to be able to support the customers that we support. So when we go first, so let's go down all the way to your page. Let's go right into the operating budget. So that will be your page 10. Is everyone on this first page here, on page 10?
Yep.
Okay, so for revenues, because the very first plan and how we presented to you initially is a zero-based plan, so all of our revenues are currently at a 0% increase. So you can see that the 2019 budget is the same as the 2018 budget, with some small things that will be increased due to water rates. So I have water meter sales. I increased that budget line because historically we've had more than the 4,500 that we've historically budgeted for. But other than that, it's a zero-based budget at this point. And then you'll see in the different scenarios when we increase our rates, the water consumption, the base rate, the annual irrigation, and the non-agricultural irrigation will actually increase by the percentage that we decide to increase it by, if we decided to increase by. Any questions on the sale of service at this time?
Quick question, Devin. I just want to be clear. The actuals for 2018, that's based on 3 quarters, I'm understanding?
That's correct. Yeah. So for the majority of those water rates, they are on a quarterly basis because we moved it to our utility bill. And
Yeah, no, I understand all that. I just wanted to be clear on that.
Yep,
Second question would be the agricultural irrigation water. Is that it's quite high compared to budget, the 804. So it's on track to be well over $1 million. Is that because of that increase that
That
we put
one-
in?
that one is not on a quarterly basis, so that is the annual number.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
the annual irrigation, that is, we bill that one time a year, and we bill that, Heather, correct me if I'm wrong, we bill that in September or October, and then that is the one-time amount that we collect.
Yeah, that's correct.
That answers that. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, yes, so the parcel tax is sort of the same thing, so you won't see an increase in there just because we were presented a zero-based budget at this point. So with that comes our operating expenses. So our operating expenses have increased obviously due to a number of different scenarios. Like for example, the administration. The administration has wages and allocated wages for staff. Like it would be like the CAO position, the CFO position, some of the deputy positions. So there's a bunch of different positions that are allocated to water just based on the time we've spent historically on water matters. And that's just a flat allocation based on the different cost center. So with that, QP has in their contract a 2% increase for next year, and obviously that's built into this budget. What is also built into the budget is one of the big increases that we had for this year was our MSP payment that we have to make. So in 2019, the federal government is getting rid of the MSP plan. So I'm sure that all of you guys were aware that you paid $75 per family and $37.50 for a single family. So we paid that on behalf of our employees. But now the federal government is implementing essentially a 2% flat rate on the total amount of salary that the organization pays in salary. So for us, that's essentially an increase of I think it was 45,000 compared to last year. So that is obviously a significant increase that the water budget and the general budget and the sewer budget is they're gonna have to take into consideration over this next year. But yeah, other than that, for administration is essentially just the increase in wages when you look at the budget, 2018 budget compared to the 2019 budget. Any questions?
I saw that, Devin, somewhere in here, but where is that reflected on this page we're looking at, that MSP problem? Is that in the, staff allocations? Is that where that's
Yes.
numbered?
Yeah. So if you see where my line is, it's the water admin staff allocation, so it's at 250, and last year it was at 426, or sorry, 450,
Yeah.
and last year it's at 426.
So how much of that is from the MSP?
The MSP, so the general and the sewer are obviously taking some of that as well, but I believe it's about a 30% of the 45,000.
Okay, so.
So what is that? Roughly, yeah,
15,000.
14,000.
Any further questions? No more questions, Devin?
Okay, so then yeah, shop allocation, small increase. Obviously, how the shop allocation works is based on the different expenses, and obviously this is part of the general budget, so this isn't a surefire number, and a lot of the different allocations won't be a surefire number until we actually set our general budget. But historically, we've always been able to be within a similar range, so it doesn't really make a material difference on the budget. Next will be the purification and treatment. So yeah, very small increase compared to last year. Obviously, labor is going to be one of the major increases, but overall, on a year-over-year basis, very small increase. So service of supply, again, about a 4,000 increase, and that is to do with the reservoir materials. So Sean, you might be able to speak a little bit better on this one than I can, but for the reservoir materials, we are having to put in a little bit of extra work for the algae control, correct?
No, the algae controls the canal.
Oh, is it, you know?
Yeah, the reservoir materials were, there was an increase of cost. We have to still do some repair work in the old reservoir, and we.
Oh yes.
And we also have, I guess, what you call landlines, well, direct buried lines to talk from pump houses to some of the rural reservoirs, and they've been damaged several times over the years. So we want to start going wireless and just start the process, and that costs a bit of money. So I would continue to put a little bit of money in each year and slowly do some upgrades that way, and that way we can have better control of our reservoir levels, especially the rural reservoirs. I'm just trying to find that info.
Thanks, Sean.
Sean?
Any other questions?
Yeah, I've got a question through to Sean, because it looks like 2018 actual. Are we gonna do a lot of that now in the fourth quarter? Are we doing that now, Sean, or why? Because we haven't spent very much of what was budgeted last year.
Yes, we've hired IITS to order the materials for this year on one of the reservoirs. I believe it's System 4 reservoir, and then the labor will be next year. So we've accommodated some of their labor for next year. So we're ordering all the materials, getting everything in place, and then doing part of the project in each year, basically over the winter, because usually it's the best time for us to do some of those projects when the canal's shut down and the systems are off, and we can do that.
Yeah, the reason I'm asking that question is you kind of explained it, that the labor portion of it might be next year, so that means that there will actually be you know, we budgeted $17,900 for labor, so we're not gonna spend that obviously, right? You're just telling me that we're gonna do that part of that in the first quarter or early next year?
Let me pull up the actual detail, and then I'll be able to answer it a little bit better.
And, sorry, Rick, sorry, and when you look at labor here, so labor is just the town of Oliver labor. It's not third party labor, so
Oh.
anything that would be labor intensive would probably go under materials, just so that there's a separation between the town of Oliver labor and
Contract.
the contract, yeah.
Is that what you were asking, Councillor Michelle?
No, I was just curious because I mean, that means that there would be like, if we weren't gonna do any, charge any of that labor, that means there's a $12,000 surplus. Because anytime there's a surplus in any of these accounts, it goes into our capital reserve account. So would I be correct in presuming that if we didn't do that labor and it's charged next year, then that labor is actually gonna be part of that 13,750? So there should be a surplus that goes into our capital reserve account, am I right?
Well, yeah, we were hoping to do, I guess, all the repairs in the reservoir this year, and we're finding it hard to source some materials, even the scaffolding, just to fit inside the hatch, because it's a fairly tall reservoir, and when you're inside, and we were even sourcing contractors, and so there may be a savings in labor for this year, and we're kind of carrying some of that over for next year, because we couldn't get to it this year. There wasn't enough time to do the work.
Okay.
Okay, the next one is transmission and distribution. So transmission and distribution, again, you're seeing an increase of roughly 23,000. And with that, you'll see right here, the canal is the major reason behind that. So the canal, you'll see that there's a big jump from 97 to 145. So there was a project report done a couple of years ago that said, hey, we need to start doing more on the canal, and this is the illustration of that, is that because we need to start doing more, you'll see that bigger increase in 2018.
I had a question on that, Devin, because when I read through this whole thing, there's a lot of presumptions here that we're going to do a lot of this canal work, basically out of operations or small capital projects for each of the different aspects that are being recommended. And I'm just wondering if council shouldn't be thinking along the lines of what happened when Solid was dissolved. In other words, when we had the original canal rehabilitation done, it was done through, a lot of it was done through grants, because it was a big project. And I think that we might be smart to do that, because then that gives us the option to apply for grants. It's a lot tougher for us to apply for all of these small grants. You know, I see it being tougher because we're always at the table. Whereas if we say that we're gonna need $5 or $6 million or whatever to do a big canal rehabilitation, then we can apply to government for some of that money. You know, whereas if it's all piecemeal, like what I saw through here, it kind of, you know, it's tougher for us to apply for grants. I don't know, that's maybe a discussion we have to have as a council as to what we really want to do with that. I know that when Solid was dissolved, that became a capital project. It was $5 million. In today's dollars, that would be like $15 million. But we were eligible for 2/3 funding, you know, because it was a capital project. We're going to rehabilitate the canal. You know, we did certain sections of flooring, walls. We did some of the flumes. It was all a big project, and it gave us the option of applying for for grant money. Whereas the way we're projecting in this budget, I think it would be much more difficult to do that. I think council should look at that, and say, we've now got a report. You know, we're going to have to spend $5, $6, whatever $million. So it gives us a chance to apply for some grant money for that. Even if we only got a third or half, it might be smarter to get that money than to try and do all these projects funded through our capital reserve account, you know, as we get to them, and we'll get to them later and discuss them later. But anyway, just wanted to put that out there because I noticed that was you know, a real big part of this budget is all these projects on the canal. Whereas I think myself that we should be doing it, you know, we should try and do it all in one shot.
Yep. So yeah, that's definitely a discussion that we can have. The only issue with that, or what I would warn against is that if we want to get grants and we're wanting to do this information and then we don't get them, then it's just a year no longer that we're not looking after the canal, right? So I would say, yeah, let's continue to look at the different grants that are available, maybe have a project that's maybe not this year, but for next year, but then continue to do the canal maintenance now. And then if we don't get the grant, like we can always apply for a grant this year for next year. And then if we don't get the grant, then we just continue down that process, right? So it's just being able to see the information in advance. So if we keep it in our operating budget and do this year's amount of the canal, and then apply for a bigger grant, and then if we get that grant, then great, then maybe we can get 20, 21 get with these amounts. But I would against taking it out of the operational budget for this year, and then us not getting the grant, and then us prolonging that that canal project.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting the one, sorry.
I think the CAO has a few comments that might provide a little bit of clarity on which direction the town's going at this point in time.
Thank
CAO.
you, Your Worship. I had the opportunity to complete the notes from the mayor, the former mayor, Hovhannis's trip to Ottawa. And in there was a discussion with regarding to expanding the scope of the application that we're putting forward for the Canal Gallagher Lake siphon. And it's being suggested that we expand it to include the $5 million that was identified in the All North project, and put that in as a contingency towards the 10.4 million. And because that particular application fund is a $20 million budget that you're required to have, so there was that discussion with regards to expanding it to include the work that has to be completed that was identified in the All North assessment.
What percentage of that $20 million, if they have it available, do the local governments have to come up with?
They will give us, of the $10 million that's there, they would give us if we asked for 10 million, they would give us 4 million. So 40% is what they would give. We have 5 million coming from the province, and then we would have to, of the 15 million, so if you're looking at 15 million, it would be 40% of that they would give us towards that. And then not just the 10, it would be, if we're going to expand the project to be 15 million over 10, then the federal governments will give us 40% towards that. Which is how much, Devin?
$6 million.
$6 million. And we have and we have 5 million from the province, so that's 11 million. So we would have to come up with the rest of it.
Which is 9, sorry.
We've got 6 and 5, 11. So we'd have to come up with 4 million.
Councilor Madison.
I was just gonna go along with Councilor Michelle, is that we should maybe stop considering the Gallagher Lake separately and look at it as just one piece of the total canal rehab, and to treat it all as one thing, which dovetails with what the CEO was saying as well.
Can I add something too? I think in the past too, it was easier to apply for grants because the canal used to be a domestic drinking water system as well. And you can get grants out the yin yang on domestic drinking water. It's agriculture water, it's a little harder to get the grants. But Kathy was just telling me that tonight before the meeting too, that she was applying and combining the two, so which is good. The other component, what we're talking about here, is the regular maintenance that we do every year, and we do a couple 100 meters of maintenance on the canal. We've already prepped it. We have to prep it the in the fall, early winter. So in the spring, because our timelines, because of weather, are short, and we did 241 meters of prepping, and then in the March, we will be prepping it for concrete at that point. So that'll repair that 241 meters. The majority of the costs on that canal this year, the big jump, is because of the algae control. I mean, there's no simple way to. It's about $55,000 more than what we've ever paid, because we can't use some of the old products anymore. They're just, well, they're banned, and we're trying to find. We were searching and doing some research and trying to find products that were natural and non-harmful and still did a decent job. And we're kind of playing with one project we started this year, and we have to increase the dosages to really see if it works next year and to do it properly. So that's why. And moving forward, unless somebody can point out a different way of combating algae, it's a big problem. And the farmers would know, anybody with intakes or screens on the irrigation systems would know. There was a period this year where we went through about a week or 2 weeks and it was really bad. So we're trying to combat that even more this year.
Yeah, I realize if we're gonna do whatever section of floor, I wasn't suggesting not doing that. I just said, as I was going through this at home, that there were a lot of the future capital projects that were tied to that. So that's
Yeah,
what I was
agree.
talking about, Sean. I wasn't talking about not doing it this year, because we got, we're on a regular schedule of maintenance.
Yeah, no,
whatever.
we have a
But-
regular schedule.
Yeah, but if it was made as part of the capital project where we got grant funding, then we could do all of the anticipated ones all in one shot.
I'd rather do that.
You know what I mean?
That-
Well, sure. yeah,
That would be, it's a lot easier to manage that and then to manage several small projects over every year.
Absolutely.
Okay, Devin?
Okay, thank you. No, and Councilor Michelle, I think that was, yeah, it's a great discussion to have. The more that we can get grants to fund our stuff, obviously the less it's going to be on our taxpayers. So, great conversation. So pumping power. So you'll see that pumping power has actually decreased a little bit compared to last year. I think that last year we were a little bit too. The rates didn't increase as much as we had thought they were going to. So because of that, I see that this amount being under budget for the 2018 year. So with that, even with the increase that we expect for 2019, I think that the 377 that you see here at the bottom is going to be enough budget for our 2019 year. There's some major ones that, like this Buchanan one. This was a significant one that we decreased in the 2019 budget. Obviously, this is a newer pump, so it's not costing as much as it did in the past. So, any questions on pumping power? That one is actually going down compared to last year.
Devin, can I just add to Black Sage domestic pump? We're in the process of doing some electrical controls upgrades and putting a VFD on the 100 horsepower motor, so that we should see even more power savings at Black Sage, but you can never predict what those are going to be. So
yeah. So yeah, I definitely think that the amount that we have in total for the pumping power for the water is going to be sufficient for the 2019 budget. Pump maintenance, when we get to the pump maintenance, overall, there's obviously a lot of different line items in there. There is a big increase there for roughly $16,000. Yeah, last year it actually decreased from the 2017 budget, and then this year it's going to go back up to essentially what the 2017 budget year was. There was it was a lighter year in 2018 for pump maintenance that we projected for anyways. And in 2019, we anticipate going a little bit back up there.
I have a question, Evan. Just that the Tuckalnuit pump materials, Fairview Irrigation and Hester Creek, is there upgrades going to those pump stations?
I'll give that to Sean to answer.
Okay, for Tuckalnuit, we're pulling a pump at Tuckalnuit, so we're usually on this, sorry. So there's usually extra labor involved, and we usually take it up to Merle's, and they kind of refurbish the pumps. So anytime there's an increase where you see a little spike in some of those pump houses, it's generally because it's a maintenance year for one of the pumps. So we pull the pump, send it up, they fix it, and we're finding it's not that cheap anymore. You can spend depending on the horsepower of the pump, the size, you can spend anywhere from 9 to 12,000, 15,000 on average, and then a new pump can be 25 plus. So we try to do, we're looking at revising the schedules, the maintenance schedules, because of the increase of refurbishing these pumps and seeing if we need to bring them in as many times as we do. They're on a cycle, so many years. There are certain pumps we have to bring in regardless, and that's more on the sewer side. But
No, that's good, Sean. I was just wondering if you were doing an upgrade in the pump, or it was just, having to take a pump out of service and get it overhauled.
I think Hester Creek is a lot higher because we are just outright replacing a pump. It's old, and it's beyond its life. It's already been refurbished several times. After it's been refurbished so many times, you look at finally replacing it.
Good, thank you.
Oh,
Yeah, Devin, how much do we add to the pump reserve account every year?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Well, because I was just wondering if we shouldn't be maybe using that reserve in a different way. In other words, instead of having a year like we did in 2016, where because it throws our operation budgets out of whack, 195,000, and then we're down, to 127. Now we're at 171. I'm wondering if we shouldn't, because we're putting money into that fund,
Yeah.
we shouldn't be using it as a buffer. In other words, take money out of it when we have a year where we have to do a lot of pump maintenance, and on a year where we're lower, then we don't take any out. You know what I mean? And I'm just wondering if there's enough in there that we're putting in there that we could use that, because there's a big difference some years from one year to the next. Why not use that as that buffer to try and
Smooth it.
yeah, smooth it out so that we have more of a normal, whatever, 150,000, just picking a number, whatever.
Can I make
Yeah, but I
a
think that was probably the original intent of the reserve, is to have those smoothing out of the 5-year service plan. And so yeah, that's definitely a great idea, and we do that with many different things. Like we're doing that with the solid waste contract, right? So that's a really good idea.
Yeah.
Let's see here.
Just a second, Director of Operations has a comment.
I was wondering if I can make a suggestion that maybe not so much for refurbishing the pumps, but use that pump contingency when we're actually replacing a full pump. That may be a good idea, because that's $25,000. I believe the pump contingency fund has 90.
Yeah, I think that's awesome.
69?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe on those years, that may be a good way of replacing a pump outright.
Yeah, so like the one that we're doing for Hester Creek, that might be a good way to offset that replacement of the pump, because if we have 69 in there, we could use 25,000 or whatever the cost is for that pump, and then that would bring us down to net neutral on the pump, on the actual pumping maintenance, right? Is that what you're saying, Councilor Michelle?
Yeah, do we need a motion to do that, or can we just, as consensus, decide that that's the direction? I think it makes a lot more sense. I mean, that was the original intent, it's also good to have that there in case there's a catastrophic failure of the pump. So you wanna make sure you've got enough money there to cover you if something happens, you know, when you didn't foresee it. But I think we could use that, like that smoothing out effect, it'd be smart to do that. It's a lot easier for budgeting pros, you know, every year, so it doesn't fluctuate by $30,000 or $40,000. Cause that's like 1 or 2%.
It shows that on this side, the bottom line, what it's putting into reserves is really whether that's a smooth number or not. That's what really matters, because you're pulling in and out of reserves every year.
Yeah, no, so even if we say 25,000, so like look at this increase from just the Hester Creek one. So if we said that that's 25,000, that would bring, it would still bring this amount. This amount would be the same, obviously, because it's an expense, but our reserves down at the bottom would be offset by the 25,000.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nope, that makes sense.
It's just a matter of how much money do you really want in reserves. If you're never gonna use them, I mean, then it's, you know, just keep putting money in there forever. I mean, and we had this discussion last year, Devin, even with our capital reserve. You know, why are we borrowing money sometimes when we have a lot of our own money? I mean, we're losing even if it's the difference of whatever bank, you know, we have to pay versus what we get for our money. We don't get much for our money, and they charge us quite a bit, so. I mean, I believe in using our money if we've got it.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I definitely made a note of that, and I will take that to change for our next time. So that's I made a note of it, and we'll make sure that that comes back for that.
The CEO has a comment.
Thank you, Your Worship. With respect to the way of doing that, going into reserves for new pumps, and I believe it would be better if it was in a resolution, because not everybody's gonna be at the table all the time, so if that direction is provided through a resolution, then that's, if the next CFO or next council is aware of, that's the way that it has been set up, then it's better to have that motion rather than just a note somewhere.
I understand what you're saying, but at the same time, I don't think that, you know, you can't really say new pumps. I think what I'm trying to achieve is to try and get more of an even budget every year for that line item.
Okay.
In other words, 1 year, you know what I mean? I don't know how to word it, but it's easier to, you know, for budgeting purposes if it's a smooth line. Say you're averaging, your 4-year average is $160,000 or $150,000. So by using the reserve account to in and out, to keep that, it's much easier for budgeting. You know, I mean, that $40,000, you know, that's a 1.5% increase. You know, and that's just that one line item.
Yeah.
That's moving around. Anyway,
I have a comment. For an item that expensive, that is capital, can that not be a capital item funded from reserve instead of including it in the operational budget?
It could be.
What is the limit on capital now?
Sorry, Sid, I didn't hear what
What
Mayor said.
what is the threshold for capital versus operational?
I think it's 10,000 for.
Yeah, usually for us it's 5,000, and it really depends on like the type of expense. So like if we're getting a brand new pump, that might fall under capital. But if we're just repairing the same pump, that's not going to qualify as, like, even though the expense is 7,000, that's not going to qualify as a capital project. Like it has to still meet the criteria of a capital asset. And so a brand new pump would, but repairing an old one and it costing 7,000 doesn't. If that makes sense.
Yep.
So like this Hester Creek one, that one might actually have to be capital. So yeah, we'll look at that for sure.
Councilor Rosenberger?
Yeah, just from the discussions, if you can look at, Devin, if you can look at what the average is for the last 5 years, and then we can just set that as the number
Yeah.
for ongoing, and then we take out a reserve or put back into reserve if we're above or below that line. Is that,
yeah.
you know?
I mean, on years where you don't use a lot, then you're gonna put more into that reserve. I think it'd be to me, it makes a lot more sense for budgeting purposes.
Yeah.
Cause you don't have to say you're wondering, should we have, you know, I don't know what 1% equals.
How long would
budget.
that
I read
run?
it. Huh? Oh, we've been running that reserve for a long time.
There's only
Oh, long.
$70,000.
Yeah, we only put 4,000
What do you
in
mean?
it every year.
They only put 4,000 in there.
Yeah, so like that's like you talk about the big swings. So if we use 40,000, that's essentially that reserve's depleted, right? So you couldn't do the big swings, but if you say every year we're gonna at least smooth it out the 4,000 that we put in, then it makes sense.
Because they're.
It all depends on the sustainability. Like if you can use, like say for a couple of years you could use 7,000 and then put in 4,000, and so there's that offset of 3,000 that you can continue to eat at. But if you say you use 20 and only put 4, then you only really have 4 years that you can use that reserve, right?
Yeah, I don't think we should deplete it either.
So, are you still looking for a resolution?
No,
I think they understand what we,
Yeah.
when it comes down
So-
to final.
Like, is there a limit, 10%, is that what you're saying? You know, 10% of the.
10% of the
of the
reserve.
Reserve in any given year.
Yeah.
And you know, that's,
Yeah.
Well, it isn't part of the discussion here today about, increasing user fees and putting more money in the reserve to be sustainable. I don't think we've had that discussion yet, so we're kind of jumping ahead.
well, this is just one small reserve,
Just
Yeah.
one,
just the pump repair
just
reserve
a pump repair
Yeah,
reserve.
that we're talking about, not general reserves.
Yeah, that pump repair reserve is really just for this one. Well, it's a number of accounts, but it's this one line item essentially
One line.
that makes up this 171. So, like, even if you want to say that you want to bring it down to the 2018 budget year, then it's not going to show. You're not going to have, or at least not this year. You're not going to have an increase for that line item. So you can say bring it down to 155, and then that reduces the amount by 16,000. So 16,000 is roughly 0.6 of an increase for the water rates, and that's pretty good. But yeah, do you want me to take out the Hester Creek one, and fund that completely out of that reserve, or do you want me to bring it down to the 2018 budget level?
I would prefer you took out the pump and brought it forward as a capital request, so I'm funded from the pump reserve.
If it's a new pump.
Yeah, see, if it's a new pump,
It's a new pump,
I
it should
would
be
prefer
capital.
that we use it for
Okay, so yeah, if we,
new pumps.
so if we take that amount out, then that amount will be less than this total line item should be less than last year's budget. Then are we okay with that then?
Yeah, I think so.
That might,
Okay.
it might also be something to consider is that we put a line in our capital budget for pump replacement. You know, if you're working on a schedule for repair, then we should also have a schedule for replacement. And be able to have a 10-year plan and say over the next 10 years, at various times, we're gonna need capital expenditures for pumps.
Would that be something, Ron, would that be something that would make sense to you?
I agree that it should be on the capital, now that we're talking about it, thinking about it, so, and then that could be funded partially by reserves or however, whatever works out best for us. And having a reserve, sorry, Councilor Mattis?
What I was saying was, is if you look at all of our pumps and say, well, the average life is 20 years, so therefore we have to replace one pump every year, then we put, just as we do for a 5-year plan, we've got a capital plan for pumps replacement. If we don't use it, then, or if we don't need it in a particular year, then certainly it can be pulled out at that time. But if we're planning for a pump to be replaced every year in our capital plan, it's just something that we would know that it's there, that it should be there.
I would agree with you if we were replacing them that frequently, but we're not, so I would wait until we do replace them and I'll make sure I put it onto the capital. Yeah, I'll put them on that time,
Makes sense.
cause it could be every 5 years, it could be,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, so that's a good one. So we'll take that one out and put it on the capital budget, and then since that will bring it lower, then we won't worry about that for this year. Okay, then water meter reading is essentially the next one, so customer billing and collections. So this one, is the utility clerk position, so obviously there's an increase in salaries, but then there's also an increase in water meters purchased. So not only have the water meters themselves increased in cost, but you can see from the prior years that we're actually doing significantly more repairs. So right now, we put the water meter system in 2009, Heather.
Yes.
Yeah. So in 2009, so it's already been roughly 9-10 years before we've had major replacements. So now we're seeing a lot of replacements having to be done for minor repairs or not reading or whatever the issue is. So I actually increased that budget by, you can see it, by roughly 8,000 this year on the total line item expense. Any questions on that?
Council was warned by your predecessor, this would happen.
Yeah. Welcome to me.
The next one is principal payments. So obviously this is debt. So the next two sections are debt. So the reason why you see the principal payments go up by roughly 5,000 is because the interest payments go down by roughly 5,000. So it's still, you're still making the same payments on the exact same loans, but the way that the one loan works is that you pay more of a principal every year and your interest goes down. So that's what you see for that loan. And it's the 2010 water projects. You can see that the increases in the 5,500 is increased in the principal portion of it, and then it's decreased in the interest portion. The other ones have set schedules where you pay the same principal, you pay the same interest, and every year over year. So that's why they don't change. Amortization. So amortization, I just use the prior year's actual that we have. This is a non-cash item, and we do not have to fund it. So you see that here, this water operating fund is at 524, and then with taking amortization out, you see it as a zero effect. So if we put it in just to take it out, it's a financial statement gain that I need to put it in. And yeah, so then we look at reserves. One of the reasons why we're able to show a balanced budget is because we're not putting away as many reserves that we did prior year. So if you look at last year, especially the water capital reserve, we're at 388. This year, because of the increases in the other expenses, we're at 318. So that is one of the concerns that obviously we have as a stability and a sustainability thing going forward. You'll see in the next when we do our capital that we're actually taking out a significant amount of reserves for our capital projects and only putting in a certain amount, and there is that deficit that I would like to make up over a certain period. But that being said, both the operating and the capital are, for the most part, worst case scenarios. So obviously, when we look at the capital projects, we're going to be looking at grants, we're going to be looking at different things that we could fund it that isn't out of the water capital reserve. And so when we find those solutions, we're able to obviously not use the water capital, and then there's more in there that will be able to help us going forward. So though that it looks bad that we're essentially decreasing our amount that we're putting into our water capital reserve by 67,000, but then again, this is essentially the worst case scenario. Being conservative, making sure that we don't have to come back to you on a monthly basis saying, hey, we're over on this line item, we need to increase it. So this is the overall of the operating budget. And you can see I gave you many different scenarios, and with those scenarios, it increases this amount that we're putting away for capital reserve. Any questions for that?
Devin, I just want to clarify, just to be sure that with the amortization versus what we're putting into reserves, in actual fact, we're wearing out our assets faster than we're putting away money to replace them. Just so we understand. That's well, you can make an argument that amortization isn't the best way to
to depreciate your assets. But yes, essentially, you can see that from the 5-year capital projects. So like, if you take the average of the 5-year capital projects that we're going to be doing over the next 5 years, we're roughly taking out, sorry, I have that number here. We're roughly taking out 636,000 out of our water capital reserve, and we're only putting in the 316,000. So there's that deficiency, right? So we're depleting and we're needing to replace our assets at a much higher rate than what we're putting into. So luckily we have a significant ballast in our water capital reserve right now that we're able to sort of stop the bleeding on that aspect. But I do, for sustainability reasons, want to increase that amount so that we can get to a point where the amount that we're taking out on a given year is the amount that we're putting into it out of our operations, if that makes sense. Sorry, I wasn't able to hear whatever was said there.
We said,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, it makes
I'm
sense.
not used to council agreeing with me, so. So the next one, we'll go over the projects. Obviously, here's a great listing that Sean developed on all of the different capital projects that we're looking to do. They are in order of the as they're listed on the capital project list. So if you have any thought or discussion on what the different projects are, please refer back to this list. Sean spent a lot of time on this, and he did a fantastic job. And we'll just go right into the numbers if you guys don't have any questions on the actual wordage of the different projects.
I got a couple things. The first list there is carry forward projects from previous years, so are those approved projects? Or are they?
Yep, so they were approved in the 2018 budget, but they were either not able to get them, or they were, a portion of it was grant funded and we were not able to get the grant funding for it, so they didn't happen. So then we're just moving to the next year.
Which ones are grant funding? I know the Gallagher Lake siphon repair is a lot depending on grant funding, but are the other ones as well?
The majority of the ones that are left over were just projects that we weren't able to complete from the 2018 year.
If you look on the long-term capital expenditure sheet, it shows you which ones are grant funded, which ones are borrowed.
Page 27.
There was two others that on there, that restoration from creek floods. That's when we had mudslides coming down Hester and Tinhorn Creek. We were doing restoration and doing some work there. The province, that's specified work. So with more flooding last year, that changed it a bit, and we were able to do some of the restoration, but we're not complete. And the other one, Canal Flood Preparedness Project, there was a grant that was forwarded that came to our attention, and we're actually looking, and that's 100% grant funded, and we're looking at actually covering portions of the canal in those flood areas, so that could help in the future. We may not have to do as much mitigation.
So I see a lot of these ones are dependent on grants, and then there's 3 other projects that are identified for 2019. I guess what I'm looking for is some kind of a priority list. Are some of these ones that we're looking for grants, for example, enough of a priority that we should be doing them whether we get a grant or not? And maybe something on the list of 3 is something that can wait. Just trying to get a sense of what is of all these projects, where are the priorities for 2019 and the carry forward projects? Are there any carry forward projects that need grant funding to go forward that is actually becoming a priority because we haven't got grant funding and it's been sitting there for a while?
Well, Gallagher Lake is definitely a priority number 1. the canal flood preparedness project, that would carry forward, and unless we got 100% grant funding, and that's what that grant was actually 100%, I believe. So it's just a way, our guys have been dealing with floods the last 2 years on 2 creeks, and it's affected our operations. It's set us back on work. It's just like everybody else in the area. The list of priorities.
Sean, just on that one, if I could ask a question, because also in the line of thinking with Martin, so that we've got $50,000 penciled in there in 2019, so even that, if we don't get the grant, we won't spend, right? Because you're saying it's.
That's correct, the 50,000, so if we applied for a grant in the coming months and found out halfway through the year that we got it, then we'd start design. So we need that 50 grand to get going. But we're not gonna spend anything until we find out if we do get it. So we were turned down last year, but we're gonna try one more time if that grant's still available. I believe it is.
And Mayor, or Your Worship, there's projects not in the water budget, but in the sewer budget that we were looking for. We were looking for grant funding, and we weren't able to get it. And so this year, we are actually. It wasn't the sewer budget, right, Sean?
That's
So
correct.
we
Yeah,
have
the
project.
diffusers. Yeah.
Sorry, did he agree with me, or I'm not sure.
Yes, I agreed with you. Sorry.
Okay, good. Okay. I actually can't hear you. It's not that I'm being like petty or anything. Just
No,
I
nobody's saying anything, it's very quiet here. At times.
It's okay. I tone you out too.
Yeah, it's all good. Yeah, so this is what we're looking at. So obviously the major expenditure is the Gallagher Lake siphon repair. You can see that if you take out the Gallagher Lake siphon repair, we're looking at only $4 million over the next 5 years. So water capital, I think that we have a very good plan in place where each year we do a relatively similar amount every single year, and with that we're able to fund it out of our capital reserve. We're able to put money away into our capital reserve so that we can fund it. But you'll see at the very bottom here on the next page, on page 28 for you, for council, you'll see that this is for 2019. You see that this is the opening balance that I project that to be for the opening of 2019. And then these are the capital projects that are going to be. These are the capital withdrawals that we're going to be using every single year. So you'll see that by 2021 we are at a very low balance, but then we are putting more away than we are taking out. So we are with this plan currently, we are going to be using a significant portion of our water capital reserve, and a lot of the portion actually in 2020. But we are in the long run in 2023, and we still project to have roughly $350,000. And this is, and like I said, this is the worst case scenario. So this is if we don't have any increases for this year, and then only a CPI increase for the next 4 years. So this is sort of the worst case scenario, is 348 at the end of 2023. Does that make sense on the logic of what we're putting? This is what we're putting in over the next 5 years, and this is what we're taking out over the next 5 years. And this is just to do with this is a 0% increase, and then this is 2% increase just based on CPI. That makes sense?
Yes.
Okay. So
Clear as mud.
Yep, makes sense.
clear as mud. Good. That's the way I like to have it. So yeah, of these capital projects, are there any in 2019 that you'd like to see be deferred? Is there anything that you'd like to see moved up? It's obviously this is the schedule that me and Sean have created, but this is your budget, and you are able to move projects as you see fit.
I just,
The only comment I would have there is, because I've been giving this some thought, is what I suggested earlier, that we take a look, because now we have a report on the canal, and we take a look at coming up with a capital project for that, and doing it all at once. And I would prefer that, because if we do get any amount of grant money, even if it was only $1 million on a 5, and then you have to borrow the other 4, it still costs your ratepayers $1 million less.
Right.
You know, I mean, that would help our budget tremendously going forward, because we're gonna have to spend so much money on the canal, you know, going forward every year. So if it was all done at once, any kind of grant money we could achieve, even if it's topping up the Gallagher Lake, and even if it's only $1 million, if you really think about it and you look forward, that's $1 million you've saved. You know, that you don't have to. So I think we really need to take a look at that. Because otherwise, our operating budget every year with this canal, with what is going to be recommended us doing on an annual basis, is going to start crushing our budget, because it's so much money that we need to spend on it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So what we'll do is that I think that we'll start, say 2021, we'll put a project in, like obviously not in 2019 or 2020, but 2021 we'll put a project in for the canal, and we'll put like a bigger one in, and then we'll put it as grant dependent, or at least a portion of it grant dependent, and then we'll look at the different financing scenarios that we can do for that, and then hopefully over the long run, if we do a big push, that will drop our canal costs on an annual basis, and then it'll all be an offset, right?
Yeah, because I looked, but even at some of these projects, like there's one here, I don't know where is this, for like changing the rakers or whatever they're called, and it's $40,000 or something, you know, where did I find it?
yeah.
But all of those could be done at once, you know what I mean? And if we ended up getting some money from a grant for that, which is, I think, favorable, you know, when you look at it. And especially if we tied it in, we could get more money now with Gallagher Lake, then those projects wouldn't be done. They wouldn't be projects that are in this budget right now. They'd be part of the big project, even if you had to delay them a year or two. You know what I mean? So we wouldn't be spending that money right now on all these smaller projects. Anyway, that's my 2 minutes. Where did I see that?
Just to follow along with Councilor Michelle as well, I think you're referring to the upgrade to trash racks.
Yeah, trash
Like
racks.
that particular one is a $50,000 item,
Yeah.
and when you read the description of it, it's like, we're not anywhere near ready to move on that, you know, and yet it's in this year.
Yeah.
Because the recommendation we got isn't workable, we have to figure something out. Well, I think we need to be further down the line before we actually put it in the budget, to say, you know.
That's right, I think all these could be lumped together and do just like they did back in 1991 or 92 or whatever, when we did a huge canal rehab, you know, and we got 2/3 funding for that. And instead of, it continued to be a drain on our budget every single year.
The CEO has a comment. Kathy?
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't believe that's in this year. I do
No,
believe
you're
it's
right.
No,
2021.
21, yeah.
Your worship, can I mention a couple things? Yeah, we were spreading those out, those were from, any that say CRP are from that All North report, so they're components. I mean, those could be lumped together, yeah, I don't disagree with you, that's for sure. And we're also undertaking, and I was hoping to have it before budget season, with Chu Engineering, we're looking at our water and sewer systems, and we're updating our water capital plan, which will give us better direction moving forward on some of our water capital projects. And we're fairly good on the domestic side, and I believe I sent you guys a memo on a bunch of the stuff a week ago. But yeah, we'll be looking more on the irrigation side. It would be nice to lump all the projects together if there is such a grant out there. But if there isn't, I say we keep plugging away at it. Because you may or may not get a grant, then it puts you back another year, So.
Councilor Schwarzenberg.
Thank you, Your Worship. Devin, what's our what's our borrowing ceiling? Is it 6 million or somewhere in there?
It is, yeah, it's somewhere in there. I don't have this, I don't have I can get it for you, but I don't have it right on the tip of my tongue.
Well, Heather is madly flipping pages, so she may have an answer for us here in a minute.
Next time we need another
But
another computer.
if by chance we got $15 million to do the whole shebang and had to borrow 4, is that gonna put us in a precarious position or can we ask to get our borrowing limit raised, or how does that work?
No, borrowing limit is very strict and very, you don't want to ask for your borrowing limit to be raised. From the provincial government, it's a very regulated number, and they do it because MFA has to borrow the money from outside investors and they get this AAA rating or whatever, and they can't really go past that because of the regulations that it controls for the municipalities, right? So we can't increase, we can't say, hey, let's increase our borrowing amount, but we do have a pretty healthy amount that we are able to borrow at this time. But it's all in conjunction, so we're talking about just the water capital at this point, so there's still general and sewer that we have to consider, and you'll see that the sewer isn't as healthy as the water budget. So when we look at the sewer budget, you'll see that we're going to have to borrow in order to do some of these capital projects. So that'll obviously increase our capacity.
Okay, thank you.
Any further comments? We'll continue.
Okay, thank you. So the next I'll just show you the different scenarios. So the different scenarios are here. So this is the scenario that I presented to you is that for 2019 we'll have a 0% increase, and then the rest of the years is just a CPI increase to match sort of the expenses that go along with it. So yeah, I've talked at length about this and how I think that in the long run this probably isn't our most suitable or most sustainable option. And I refer back to that council resolution that we made in 2017 that says that the 2% that we have for our canal rehabilitation be at least the bare minimum that we do, and then we look at our operating budget. Our operating budget, even if you take out the water pump that we're taking out, that's still an increase of roughly 40,000. So that's a 1.5% increase. So with that, with QP and the salaries being increased and just the cost, the CPI alone is at 2%. So I would think that for operating, we go at least 2% and then another 2% for our capital reserve for, as we outlined in 2017. But this is sort of the different scenarios. This was the first one. Plan 1 was the one that I outlined for you. Plan 2 is a 1.5% increase for 2018, and then a CPI for the next 4 years. And you'll see where it makes the major impact is this number right here. So it was 316, and then with a 1.5% increase, it is 360. And then obviously that leads into these figures, and you see that this number is a little bit more healthier than the number that was from Plan 1, and then that just means that our reserves at the end of 2023 are going to be at a healthier balance than what was projected for scenario 1. Does anyone have questions on how I did this, or the different plans or the different scenarios? I know that for the new council members that you're not used to seeing this information, and I apologize if I'm speaking too fast. Just let me know. I can break it down a little bit more thoroughly.
No questions?
Okay, thank you. And then the last one is a 3%. So this 3% increase is essentially the 2% that was made as a resolution back in 2017, and then just a 1% increase on top of that to sort of soften the operating blow. And And so you see that if we did a 3% increase, we're actually putting away more in 2019 than we would in 2018, which is obviously a positive start. And we would just continue on with there. So obviously, you would want to see in the following years, in the 2020 to 2023, we would obviously increase it, or at least we should be increasing it more than the CPI increase every year. But that's just what I've outlined for you in the water budget at this current time. So obviously, using the three-prong approach that I spoke to at the very beginning of this budget meeting, I would highly recommend either Plan 3 or Scenario 3 at the minimum, sort of to show that we're continuing to invest in our infrastructure. We're continuing to ensure that our operations are taken care of, so that our level of service is continuing to be the same, if not better, and we are ensuring the sustainability so that if there is ever a big capital project, that we're able to take that hit from our reserves and ensure that there's not a big spike in water rates. So that would be my initial thought. Obviously, it is completely up to council. I prepared these budgets for you. I give you my professional recommendation, but it is your budget, and you are able to decide on your thought process from there.
Thanks, Devin. Questions? Councilman Freeman?
I have a question going back a little bit, just about how things are placed. So if we look at the,
You might have to talk a little louder.
sorry, if we look at, I'm looking at page 25, so, and I think that's your page 27, Devin.
Okay.
Which is a long-term capital expenditure program. So in the future years, our Park Drive rehabilitation, like out at 2023, and School Avenue rehabilitation out in 2022. And I think, if I'm understanding right, that those are the water portion of the upgrade that would go along when we redo the streets or sidewalks, or that conversation that we were only having a couple of weeks ago about priorities. So if we were to, after consultation, decide that one of those projects became a priority for next year, and like 150,000 for Park Drive is a fairly decent amount, what happens if it needs to get shifted forward to 2019? What happens to everything else?
Yeah, so as you can see, like if it gets shifted, it would just have an effect on these figures. So in 2021, it probably have the biggest impact. So we are showing a very small balance at the end of 2021, using the worst case scenario, like I outlined before. But if we were able to do it, we'd still have the funds to do it,
So
essentially.
we'd still go ahead and do it. We wouldn't necessarily have to bump something else of equal value.
It would probably be prudent to do it that way, to ensure that you're being steady with your capital projects. But again, it all depends on the priority of council.
Councilor Mattis?
When I look at your plan number 3%, Devin,
Yeah.
on the second page of capital fund, I noticed in 2023 it's at 210,000. Is 3% sufficient? Should it be even more? Should it be 4%?
Yeah, I'm saying that I would think that this should be the bare minimum that we should increase it by. I would go at least 4%. Well, not at least 4%, at least the 3%, and I would recommend a higher figure just so that we can, again, using the three-prong method, have that greater sustainability for the town.
I mean, that's not to say that it wouldn't be higher, because you've only predicted 2% in the years following, but if they were higher in those years, then that number would increase as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I believe I do have a resolution for council. And again, you don't have to go with this resolution, but it is there. It is available for you. just for a conversation starter.
Any more? Councilor Grice?
Devin, do you have an idea what, I mean, obviously it's going to vary, but what this is gonna look like on a resident's water bill? So Plan 3, for example.
So, yeah, so a 1% on the very bottom of my actual report, I don't know what page that's on. Ooh,
I think
close.
that's a reference to.
On the bottom of there, I said that a 1% increase for water rates.
29,000.
Water rates are different because obviously based on your consumption, but the base amount, oh my goodness, where is it?
Page 7. Probably
There it
your
is.
favorite.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it would be annual increase of $2.85. So that would be 24 cents a month, or 75 cents per quarter.
So it says not including consumption, but the rate increase is on consumption?
Yeah, so it all depends. We can't give you a good figure on average household on,
Consumption.
like, say if we increase it by 4%, that doesn't necessarily mean that your bill's going to increase by 4% because you could use less water, right? So if you use less water, your bill's going to be less.
Do you know roughly what percentage of the bill is consumption?
I would have to defer to Heather. She would probably know better than I would.
I mean, just like are we half or?
I'm just doing a kind
I'm
of
trying
a
to
guess.
measure my own water bill in my head.
Isn't there a formula?
There is, but, I mean, our quarterly is about 35 for the base rate, and the average house, it's probably gonna be about 25 to 40% is the base rate, depending on the amount of consumption is used. In some places, that's gonna be considerably higher, and then other ones, so it's.
So consumption's 60 to 75%.
Yeah, that would be my guess, like,
You also have to remember that on this year, 2018, and then going forward, is that for our utility bills, we switched over the sewer user fee and the garbage and recycling user fee. So the sewer user fee is probably the biggest expense of them all, and yeah, that's obviously going to be a future conversation. But yeah, because we added those to the 2018 year, I wouldn't say that it would be that high, but just because of those new added expenses that we put on this year.
Page 10 might give you an indication as well, Councilor Grice, in that the base rate generates 500,000 and the metered water consumption generates 1.1 million, so it's about 1/3.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Thank you, Councilor Mattis.
But that doesn't necessarily reflect the average house.
No, it's not average, but it's,
Gives you a better idea.
it gives you.
It's in the ballpark.
Well, we could say, I guess, then that the 285 annual increase, you could be triple that to include consumption? Roughly?
Yes.
So just to,
Based on
obviously
those
it's
numbers,
gonna
yeah,
vary,
so
but
if it's
yes.
$3, the
It's
bill
like
will be
$5.
$9.
Yes, that would be
So
a,
it's roughly $9, so a
Rough
4%
guess.
increase would be, a 4% increase would be roughly $35 a year. You have to remember that's on a yearly basis, so that's quarterly, that's $9 a quarter.
thank you.
Where it starts to hurt people though is like, and I got a lot of phone calls this past year, because even though the percentages aren't high, but if your water bill is $3,000, then it's a big hit, you know.
Oh, for sure.
And now the agriculture people pay a lot for water, they're already bitching at me that they got the highest rates in the valley, you know. So I mean, we gotta think of that, you know, you gotta think of people, about people's affordability. Well, absolutely. I mean, you know, if you're a big taxpayer and you pay $10,000, you know, 3% is a lot of money, you know.
But this is metered water we're talking about.
No, I understand that, but I'm just saying when we apply the increases, we don't apply them just to metered rate or to domestic. It's applied right across the board.
Yeah, and that would change the acreage rate from 130 to 100.
No, 200 and something to two, yeah, we're pretty hot, we're very hot.
225 to.
Yeah, I can't remember what it is. Anyway, if we're looking for what we favor, I favor scenario 2, which is 1.5 and 2. And I think that's where I would be at. I know that staffs always want, and the water capital reserve account, I think we need to look at like I said earlier, we need to talk to True and then analyze our canal rehab, that study that we did. And maybe that's gonna help us in the future, if we can get that done as a capital project. You know, some of these that are in here on page,
The capital money comes out of operations at the end of the day.
yeah, yeah, it is, that's right. So if anything can be funded by the capital, won't be coming out of operations later on. I think if we get done with that.
No, if you can get grants, but if you're not getting grants, it's ultimately coming from the surplus in operations. So it's still operational money. You know, we took 25,000 out of the pump in operations, but that'll end up in the capital. It's still the same money.
Yeah, that's right. Anyway, even like, if you look at 2020, there's a $200,000 for Flume 3 structural improvements. That's one that's $200,000 over and above. That's a capital project. That's one that could be done as part of this project.
Part of a bigger.
Yeah, where then we're borrowing for the balance.
It should almost be part of a flume rehab instead of the gallery.
Yeah, that's right.
It's the whole scenario.
I think we need to look at that, because I think that,
Totally agree.
you know, I got a feeling that we would, you know, if we've got a $5 or $6 million project, or now it gets lumped in with Gallagher Lake and it's a $15 million project, that we can bring in more money. Why not bring that money in and borrow? It's gonna be cheaper for our residents to do that than us spend all that money. There's a real danger too, and I brought this up last year, it's great to have a really healthy capital reserve account. I mean, it looks great, but if government looks at your books and says, well, why are you asking us for money? You got $1 million in your capital reserve account, why do you use it? You know, it's really difficult to go to government to ask for money when you've got lots of money sitting on the bank account. You know, so there's a real danger when you're looking for government money. You know, it's prudent to do this, but we could be hurting our taxpayers by not getting access to government money. I mean, you know.
I would have to comment that I would disagree with you. Having a healthy reserve is critical to the operation of the town.
Well, I agree.
You get a slide and you wipe that canal out,
Yeah.
nobody's got water,
I don't disagree.
you don't have time to get a grant. You need to have that reserve there.
Yeah.
Well, you do, because I mean, the provincial government reacted instantly.
But
You know, they reacted instantly and gave us $500,000, and then they committed another $5 million. So I mean, if you do get that, you know, I mean, when there's a disaster scenario, governments, they're great at responding to it. And, you know, we're very thankful for that. You know,
Deputy Financial Officer.
I'd just like to get, Devin, can you hear me?
Not that great.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Not that great.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, I just want you to clarify to council regarding these three scenarios that you have for increases. The 3% that you have as your recommended is actually 1% plus the 2% that was made by council resolution in the prior year for 2019, correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Okay, so if we went with scenario 2, we wouldn't even be meeting that 2% council resolution that was made in prior years.
That's correct.
Okay, and then secondly, I just wanted to comment on the irrigation and the domestic water and how it applies all across. We have in previous years, I believe, I can't remember the actual years, but we did it in 2 years, where the domestic rate was a different increase than the irrigation rate, and that's just something I wanted. Pardon me? I believe it could have been 2011, I'd have to look back, but we did do that.
I think it's 2011, 13.
It was in 2013? Okay, I know it was done, I just couldn't remember the actual year, so I just wanted to point that out to council.
Could you speak a little louder?
I don't.
Councilor Camila?
I just have a question, because I did not understand that at all until you just explained it. So if we have a council resolution from a previous year, saying that we're gonna do a certain thing, how can we even have the option to not do that?
Because
Aren't we just
every
automatically-
year it gets approved by the council, and so that was the council made previously, and it's not by law, it's a resolution, so you can change resolutions.
So it's only meant to remind us that we thought that was a good idea last year?
And
Every
and-
single decision council makes can be reversed by the next council.
And one council cannot commit the next council. then.
Exactly.
Right. On any
It's a
decision.
reminder, okay.
It's-
A reminder on a resolution, excellent.
Exactly, yeah.
Glad you reminded us.
Are we waiting for a resolution?
I'm just waiting to see if there's any more
Yeah,
questions.
essentially.
I'm good. I'll go ahead.
Then,
Where did you have it, Rick?
Well, I'll just make my comment that I think that we should not, I'm okay with the 3%, but I don't think we should go below 2% because that is where we were committing to in 2017. In 2017 and 2018, we went 3% each, and then the following 3 years was to be 2%. So I would feel that the minimum we should do is the 2% that we committed to in 2017, and actually I think the 3% is fine.
Well, I prefer 4 myself, only because when I look at that $200,000 reserve balance 5 years from now, and I recognize that things change along the way, that concerns me. To me, that's too low for a $15 billion system.
Yeah.
Anyway, Devin, when I suggested scenario 2, I thought it was the 1.5 plus the 2.
No,
You know, so,
sorry.
yeah,
that
that's
was-
how I had read that.
Okay,
You know, I'm comfortable with scenario 3,
okay,
you know, which is your recommendation.
Yeah.
I don't think we should be raising it more than what you're recommending. I mean, we're having, you know, it's tough for people to pay their bills if they got big bills.
well, we do have a recommendation before us, and I would like to call a question. Do I have a motion to move?
Where's
We
the
don't have a
recommendation?
There's
We don't have one.
We don't have
It's on
anything
the
else.
screen.
I would move, your worship, scenario number 3.
No, it's not in the report.
Okay, I'll second that.
Okay.
So I moved 3 and Petra seconded.
So the motion we're moving is that council approve the draft water operating and capital budgets as attached to the November 9th, 2019 water operating and capital budgets report, and the council directs staff to prepare water user rates and water tax rates bylaws based on 3% increase from 2018 due to operational capital funding and future grant obligations, needs with any generated surplus being transferred to water reserves. Do I have a mover?
I've already moved.
And second.
Councilor Ventimiglia. Call the question, those in favor?
I've got another motion, your worship. I would.
Can I finish this one?
Yeah, I think we should, no,
Opposed, first we opposed.
Stan's
Oh,
again opposed.
I thought
Motion
everybody's
carries.
hand was up for carried. Sorry. I looked around, I didn't see any hands on yours. Worship, first, Kevin.
See you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to ensure that we mark down this, that it was unanimously carried, because we
It's
have to
important.
have that.
It's important. It's easy.
Unanimously carried, or we have to send it to the province,
That's right.
if there's anybody opposed.
Still
Okay.
pass.
I've got another motion. I would like to move that staff look into, along with True Engineering, taking all of the information from the canal study that we did and putting it together as a capital project to do it all at once, including some of the items that are in our capital long-term plan that's in this budget.
I'll second that.
Second. Call the question? Discussion.
You want a discussion? Yeah, we can make it part of the water capital plan, and I can discuss that with Steve, and he can add that in and combine it, so, yeah, we can definitely do that.
And looking at some of the sections that we read, obviously, there's a plan there to replace certain sections going forward, right, Sean? That's how it's sustainable, so
Yeah,
instead, just lump that all together and tell us what would it cost to do that? Is it $6 million, is it $5 million, is it $7 million that we need to do that? And that'll buy us, 10 years or whatever that, I mean, we should look at that.
yeah, I can have them look at that for sure.
Councilor Schwarzenberg.
Thank you, Worship. Through the chair to the CAO, I don't know the time frame that the Director of Operations has on that, but can that be done in time for you to make the grant request to the federal government?
Thank you, Your Worship. That is a conversation I am going to have with True Engineering and Mr. Goodsall, because it will be incorporated into an expansion of the application that we're putting forward for the siphon itself.
Thank you.
Your Worship, I want to pin this down a bit better on this, when our former mayor went to Ottawa, he was told that it was only $20 million project?
I indicated that to council when I reported in on that, that the budget amount is, the minimum is a $20 million project. And so they can't change all of the rules, so they're saying, can we expand on the application to include something else that, with respect to like the $5 million of work that was identified in the All North application, which the package that was also provided to them in this last trip down to Ottawa by the former mayor. So they have all of our reports that have been done by True and All North, and they're quite aware of the $5 million and what it would be used for. And so that they're suggesting.
Still, we wouldn't qualify because we wouldn't get to 20.
But you can have a contingency in there also, right? You can have a contingency fund.
Another $5 million.
Yeah.
And that was.
And it gives us the tool to go forward.
Right.
And they've given us the application. True Engineering has already done the webinar, and they have started to work on the application itself. But I will be, in concert with the Director of Operations, we will have a discussion with True Engineering to expand to include the All North recommendations.
Okay, now that was 40% you said earlier, right? So that would be granted like 40%, so if you came to $15 million, what's 40% of $15 million, whatever.
Six.
Yeah.
And we have 5, so that's 11 million.
Yeah, so under that scenario, we'd get $11 million that we're not getting now, right?
Well, we have 5.
We have
No, but I'm saying, because we're gonna be doing this work to the canal.
Yeah.
You know, so we'd be getting another $1 million that we don't have now.
Yeah. Yes.
What also ties in, and we didn't really get an answer out of Devin, as far
Actually,
as
it's 2
our.
extra million.
No, yeah, 2 extra million, that's right. As far as our debt ceiling and how that ties into this, can we get a better handle on that, please?
We will get that information and forward it on to council so that you are all aware of it, what the debt ceiling is. It's not at our fingertips right now, but we will provide that to you within the next day.
I mean, the advantages of doing that as well is then you know what your rates are going to be to finance that, what you've done.
Yes.
I mean, you know, because of debt service.
Yeah.
Yeah. It makes budgeting lots. I don't like these ups and downs. Trying to smoothen it out is much smarter for us to do it.
Okay.
We have a motion, Councilor.
Just one more comment for Councilor Michelle. The other nice part about this and for the rest of us is that when you pull all that together, it will also show us the impact that has on our 5-year capital plan, if that's all taken out of the capital plan. It
Absolutely.
really changes that scenario quite nicely for us as well. It'd be nice to see how that breaks out
Well, that's-
separately.
That's
Keep
that's
the
why I
picture
was
all
saying, here's a
clear.
project, here 200,000, here's another one for 40,000.
Yeah.
That all gets pulled out.
Yeah, makes a huge difference.
CEO.
Thank you. Would you like us to reread the resolution for you so that you know what you're going to be voting on?
The resolution that I have written down is that council directs staff to work with True Consulting Limited to consolidate water projects identified in the All North Canal assessment as part of the water capital plan. And I had a mover, a seconder.
Call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? Motion carries.
Yep.
Yes. That concludes, water matters.
Devin, we're gonna eat.
Yes, we are.
Okay.
Totally fading away.
Hey, ever since you left, those Raptors have been doing crappy, you shouldn't have left, see? They lost the next 2 games, did you see
Call a
that?
10-minute recess.
Did you see
It's
that?
down in your mailbox.
Oh, terrible, huh? Right after you left, they lost both the games, I said, Kevin shouldn't have left.
Yeah, did you wanna go down?
I
I blame you for that, Devin, see?
Yeah.
Raptors lose.
Oh my god.
Yeah, just leave it.
Yeah. No,
Easily.
No, I would not touch that.
Can I shut should I shut the mics off?
Sure.
Okay.
You can just say,
Is it West Plains?
just say it.
Maybe it's my name.
When I said
And if you want to
that,
sell
I got a
it,
recommendation
you just
for
put
it,
it in the
usually
newspaper.
Councilor will give them the recommendation.
We're taking a 5-minute break.
Well, it's right here. It's in
I would have been at the very beginning
It's
of
at the
our.
very beginning. But that time, well,
Beginning
saying
of
there,
the
the mayor does not read out the recommendation.
Normally you don't.
Okay, so
So
where
Rick
did
made
the
a recommendation,
council-
he said I move option 3,
Okay.
which was good enough,
Right.
basically,
Yeah.
and I accepted it.
That was the one thing that we didn't talk about.
We didn't
When
actually
there's
get
3
it.
different
Yeah.
options,
Pause it.
Yeah.
we'll move one of the options.
Probably
Pardon?
would have been a
Well,
good idea.
the recommendation in the report is option
Yeah.
already, like that's. where-
Yeah, they gave us 3 different options, so we had a choice to which one.
Right, yeah, we did staff's recommendation.
Hey, this is still on.
It's a long way for us to look back at the very beginning.
Yeah.
And we never covered it off at the beginning.
No, well, that's
He-
true.
He never covered it.
Usually
He would have
when I
reminded
read
us
the
that it was
report,
there.
It's
there I
off.
would read my recommendation.
Oh, we're just watching it?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
when I finish my
It's on
presentation,
continue,
I
right?
say that's my
It's on
recommendation.
pause.
Yeah, it's on pause. It's
Okay.
the, see that red big button?
But yeah,
Okay.
normally you don't have to read it.
Well, that was,
This is a really good sound.
painless. Did Devin go to eat too?
Not there,
Maybe he went to the
he's
washroom.
coming back.
Devin, it looks like you're living in a dorm room.
Is it?
I essentially am, yeah, it's a good way to put it.
Rick,
Looks more comfortable than our seats here.
Do you want a sandwich?
Hey, shut up.
Hope everybody's getting thinner in the finance department since
Yeah,
Devin's
you look like you
gone.
lost a bit of weight there.
Oh, shut it, come on.
Go on.
I do look good though. I'm not gonna
Oh my gosh, salad's so good.
What'd you say, sorry?
You're missing.
Food is so
I said
good.
my salad's really good, sorry.
The salad is good.
It's very
Devin, I'm
soft.
actually eating some and I think they have mung beans in them.
I think it's
Is
chickpeas.
here? No. Oh. Hey Devin,
sorry.
Yes.
I'm actually eating some and I think they have mung beans in them. I figured you'd like that.
Counselor Padula?
Such decisions, I don't know what they are.
That was it, gone.
Anybody need anything out of the fridge?
No, thank you.
So how did your picture go?
But quickly.
Yeah?
Which is fine. Barb said Paul prefers it that way. In and out. How did your headshots go, Rick?
Quickly. I said, hurry up.
Oh my god.
Congratulations, Councilor Bentamil, on becoming the OSRHD.
Yeah, you wiped away the other one's wiped, right?
We haven't yet.
Oh,
Why?
oh, there's nothing on there. I haven't
Did you
really used it, I just
Did
used
you
it.
see
It's
your,
all his
did you see your
trading.
screen?
Yeah, I know, you put my screensaver.
It's your online trading, right?
No, I didn't. Although there might be some web pages there, I think I closed them all. I don't know. I was looking for the history button though, so I could erase the history, I couldn't find it. That's why I hate Apple.
I know, Apple's more.
I hate Apple. I don't really buy anything from Apple.
Are we still broadcasting?
Yep.
What?
No, we're on pause.
No, you can't pause that. You cannot pause it.
But you can.
You're not supposed to pause it.
I'm glad.
So we're just on, I put it in a thing and I said, we're on recess.
What you
Yes, I will.
What you need to do is get, a picture of our logo and put it in front of the camera,
Yeah, we could do that.
so that that's what it looks at when we're not.
Yeah, yeah, but you can't,
So when
you
is
can't
adoption?
pause that. Like once you
When is
pause it, then
adoption?
it's over.
What meeting
And it
is
picks up the
it?
sound.
It'll come, it'll
Yeah,
come,
just keep it clean.
I'll have to check to find out exactly when we can get the bylaws ready. But it'll be probably the 26th, it'll come to the 26th meeting, first, second and third reading.
Anyone in salad?
This month?
You guys have
Hopefully.
coffee?
Yeah.
Do we have a special
Coffee?
meeting to
There's
make it
some
all fit?
decaf, I know that.
No, it still has to be
And then
unanimous,
there's
doesn't
just
it?
regular.
Is it on the next
Yeah.
vote? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the 20th today. When does the agenda have to be in?
Tomorrow.
I'm thinking
I
that
mean,
that's
you could
probably a
have
little
not been
rushed.
unanimous today and it's still to change it
Yeah.
for second, third.
What's the next meeting after?
10.
The 10th of December, and then we'd have to call a special one.
I was waiting for somebody to stop talking, and then everybody just kept talking. I couldn't stop yawning, sitting there, I was not looking good, I'm sure.
Just when we mentioned.
Ross was gonna have like 6 cookies each.
Maybe.
Like a big pile of cookies.
Yeah, no, I'll see what I can do.
Well, it all goes into the lunchroom tomorrow, that's why it's always extra.
Donation to the Harvard.
By Thursday?
Some deli? Oh.
By Thursday, Kathy?
We could probably even
Thursday
send it
morning.
out, we could put it as a handout even in ends of late, like,
Okay.
mark it on there, and then we can put it on there.
I just,
Send it
it
like a
would be the only
separate
thing that I do.
email.
And we just update the agenda, and
Oh.
then it would go on to it.
Oh, okay.
Okay. I will be on that first thing tomorrow.
That's more news.
You're free or discussion?
Even Thursday.
Yeah, yeah, so Thursday at 4:30.
Like to do it, that's like a steak.
To have the bylaws ready for the next agenda.
Salad was really good.
That was. That's all it is.
I'm not a salad fan.
I know.
You're not a salad fan?
It'll be solid.
That's why Devin was laughing when I told him I was eating it, and it has lung beans.
And sprouted things.
Well, there's this YouTube video of a girl that's trying to be healthy and eat salad,
Oh, okay.
and we all had a good laugh at it, and,
Was it the Baroness von Sketch one?
it was about a girl that was in her coffee room
Yeah.
at work,
And she's
Oh,
just
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
No, I don't
trying to,
disagree.
yeah.
If you can
and then
get
trying
the extra
everything
funding
to
for
be
a
able
big
to eat
project.
it,
Get
and
it
she
down.
goes into the office and they pick off a mung bean off of her shirt. Yeah, it's that one.
It's the best stuff? Oh, the
I
onion.
love that show.
The only thing I worry about is trying to get it all done within the time period.
Yeah, well, it might have to be 2
It'd
years.
have to be 2 years.
Heather,
I can't
if
remember.
you
how
enjoyed that one,
covered.
I'm sure it's
It was
on
a huge
YouTube as
project.
well.
It
It's-
covered all from road, 30,
what's
that was
If
all
you
we
enjoyed that one.
And we covered by the high
Sketch
school.
the one
It all
on-
had to, I think it was one of
Same
So
show that
you guys
goes off
did
of.
some
They do one on.
Yeah,
Fitbit.
absolutely.
Did you ever see that
Oh,
one?
no, I haven't seen that
them all
one.
though, but they're on Netflix now.
That's hilarious.
No, I haven't seen the
That
one
was
with
it.
Fitbit. I haven't figured out how to use my Fitbit yet, so it's just still in the box.
If we weren't broadcasting,
I'll have to look it up.
yeah.
I know, I just started watching with Ava, so every once in a while we have like earmuffs. For the most part, it's okay. It's like 3 years old.
Does it go live? I don't think it goes, does this go live?
Not right now.
Oh.
Well, it's on, but turn the sound down.
They're watching me
Yeah, the webcast is on, I was just shut it off.
masticate my sandwich.
Almost ready, Devin?
Oh yeah, I'm ready whenever you're ready. I was meeting.
Pass it off.
How cold is it there?
I mean, they're expecting it.
It's not that bad actually. Like it gets really windy at night, like crazy windy.
Yes.
Lethbridge is more helping.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not bad. Like during the day it's not bad, but at night it gets crazy windy and it's not fun to be outside.
What's the temperature? Did I miss that?
Not bad.
Not
bad, just
Sorry?
windy. Sorry, one more.
The temperature.
This is my reply back to Stephen.
What's that?
I'm gonna make another copy as soon as everybody else is done over here.
Trying, let's just go go.
Okay.
I'll leave no otherwise.
One minute.
Big honking.
Okay.
Okay. The bylaws will be at our next meeting on the 26th. They'll get onto the agenda.
This one?
Yeah, they'll get onto the agenda later on Friday. They'll be, the agenda.
Just go all the way around.
Heather's gonna prepare the bylaws.
I don't think so.
I don't think that. I have to stay in.
Yeah, it could have to be electronic, so.
And I could just do it for that portion of the meeting and then.
Yeah, you can't wait. Maybe just can't wait.
Nice.
Sure was.
Yeah, it is.
Like in comparison to the ones that we got in the office.
Paul should clean downstairs perhaps.
I don't know if that was it.
Hopefully it's not the photo.
Okay.
Oh, my coffee was.
Solid was
That
very good.
is my
Can't even eat this bun now.
Yeah, you better keep this.
Okay, I turned the lights back on.
Filling up actually.
I know, I gotta take
Lights
this
are
on
on.
the
Okay.
front, huh?
Let's get back to order. No delegations or petitions this evening. No development permit variance permits this evening. No bylaws this evening. Next is business. Moving to business, item K1, the 2019 5-year financial plan for sewer. I'd like to refer this matter to the CAO.
Thank you, Your Worship. The report in front of you is to provide council with the draft 2019 sewer operating and capital budgets prepared in accordance with council's zero-based budgeting direction. I'm now going to pass it over to Mr. Wanup to go through his report and answer any questions that you may have. We also have Mr. Witzel in the audience, or here, not in the audience, he's right here. And he can answer any questions that you may have as well. Go ahead, Mr. Wanup.
Did you pass it on to me? Sorry.
Yes, I did.
Okay, thank you. So the sewer budget is actually the budget that I am most scared to present to you, because I think the water budget in all the capital, the general, the water, the sewer, and the general, the sewer budget is supposed to be self-sufficient, supposed to be sustainable over the long run, and as you will be able to find out throughout this capital, throughout the budget report that I'm about to give you, the sewer budget is in pretty dire situations in order to be able to be sustainable. You'll see that to be able to fund most of the capital projects, we're going to be doing some intensive borrowing. Well, intensive, I guess, is at the eye of the beholder, but we're going to be borrowing over the next 5 years to be able to fund these capital projects. But I want you to still understand that the three-pronged approach to how I approach budget. So there's the operating budget, the capital fund envelope, and then the future debt obligation. So we're going to be looking at these on a three-pronged approach, not just as a temporary basis on maybe this should just only be CPI or whatever it is. I want you to have that in the back of your mind when I'm going through the budget report here. So overall, for your operational sewer budget, let's just go down to it. Okay, so for revenues, again, we are presenting you this information based on a zero-based budget report. So that means that none of the revenues actually increased for this amount. So you'll see, again, the revenues are very consistent with last year. With no rate increases, obviously they're going to be consistent because the way that we charge sewer is on a base rate, and the very small amount is actually metered. So, any questions on revenue so far with the zero-based increase that we present to you? Obviously, there's not a significant amount of change. Okay, going further. Overall, the operational budget for sewer actually decreased by roughly $4,300. So you'll actually see an increase in our sewer reserve by roughly the same amount. So overall, operations, they might go up in a certain column, like obviously in administration it goes up, and that really speaks to the volume of salary allocations again with the 2% QP increase, and then that payment that we have to make for our MSP. But overall, like I said, it might increase in one area, but then it decreases in another to offset that amount. Does anyone have any questions? I don't really want to speak too much about the operating budget unless you guys have concerns on the specific line item.
No, I think we're good, Devin.
Okay. Yeah, so collection again, that one went down, but then administration went up, but then collection went down. So you'll see that overall, again, the operating budget for sewer went down by roughly that $4,400. Where it starts to get tricky is obviously our capital situation. So if you guys don't have any further questions on the operating budget, I'll spend the majority of the time on the capital.
Yes, please.
Okay. So again, Sean prepared this spectacular report for all of the different reports as laid out by the capital projects that you see on the listing. So if you have any questions, please refer back to these report that Sean put together. So what I want to show you is on page 51 or probably 49 for your iPad agenda if you're looking there. We see some obviously a pretty stable and steady amount of capital projects that have to be done over the next 5 years, ranging and averaging around that $600,000 mark per year. So you'll see that some of the projects that were carried forward, the solar array, solar optics, photo optics, is sort of what was spoke to a couple of weeks ago with the solar panels at the different places that would benefit us from power savings. So that one has been grant dependent for a number of different years, and we've lowered it from $600,000 to $300,000 last year, and then this year we lowered it again to $150,000. Hopefully we can get some grant funding for that project in order to get some sort of savings on our operational side. Sean, was it the sewer assessment that was grant dependent and then needs to be done this year, or was it the Sawmill Road extension?
The sewer condition assessment, that's for the CCTV.
Yeah.
And,
So-
and then Sawmill Road extension, that would be, if, in my write-up, here, let me just refer back to it. It's kind of an improvement area, down in the industrial area off of Sawmill, but there's residential along the river. And it's just to get more people within the town boundary onto the sewer system. So that's what that project's about.
Yeah.
Counselor Schwarzenberg.
I have a question.
Counselor Schwarzenberg.
I have a question, through the chair to the Director of Operations. On that Oliver Landing, I noticed that in the water budget, it was put over to 2020, where the water was changed with the road alignment. And this sewer alignment for, again, the same location is in 2019. However, Oliver Landing seems to be not going very quickly. Is that dependent on how many people move into that area in the short term, or I'm just wondering if that should be in 2019 or should be pushed out to 2020 or beyond?
I had an oversight as well.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I got confused with the two Sawmill projects. Yeah, you're correct. We just don't know when that's gonna be done, so we try to predict when it's gonna be done. So that one could be pushed out, yes.
Well, I think it at least would make sense if you did the water and the sewer at the same time, so that the road, water, and sewer, all three of them,
That's correct.
would be done at the same time, and that the need for that is dependent on how quickly Oliver Landing develops, I would assume.
Yeah, everything's based on Oliver Landing. Like, we were always hoping that the development would get into past the second phase, and then we'd say, okay, that's gotta start triggering us really thinking about doing that road extension, because eventually that development is supposed to loop, come around onto a proposed road.
Right.
So, yeah, that could be pushed out, it may be pushed out further too, depending on how quickly they develop.
Right.
Or continue to develop.
Right.
Counselor Bentley.
I think I have two parts through to Sean. So just whatever Sawmill thing you were just talking about isn't actually on here?
The other Sawmill project is in a future year.
Oh,
And that really would be, that's the Sawmill extension, Walnut to Oak, that's the one I was thinking in the back of my head. And that could be an improvement area,
I was just gonna say.
so then it wouldn't be a total burden on the town. They would be paying for those improvements. We've had people over the years ask us when we were planning on doing that, just a couple, because they had to renew or redo their septic fields. And as a lot of people know, redoing your septic field nowadays is $20,000 to $30,000 on average, and more depending on what you have on your property. So the alternative is to go to the town.
So if you're in town and you're not hooked up to sewer, you're not paying sewer rates, that would come from.
You're not paying, unless there's sewer infrastructure running by your property, you're not paying into the sewer.
So
So
Is
what
it-
So for that, there's two different
two.
charges for sewer. So for sewer, there's a sewer partial tax, which is on your property taxes, and then the bigger amount, which is a sewer user fee, is if you're actually connected. If that makes sense.
So everybody pays the parcel tax, doesn't matter if you're hooked up to sewer or not.
If it runs past your place and you're able to connect,
Yeah.
then yes, you're paying the parcel tax. But if you are actually connected and are using the sewer, then you pay the user fee, which is the more significant portion.
So then if we're talking about this area down on Sawmill, that they're not connected and there's obviously nothing close by, they're not paying right now, so they
No.
would potentially be new customers.
That's right.
Thank you.
Councilor Mattis?
I believe that the Rockcliffe area that I live in was done as a local improvement area many years ago. And the second part of that, has any work been done to determine, like, do we have an estimate here kind of a thing, what this would cost? Has there been any work done to determine what it would cost the individuals on an annual basis, amortized over the 25-year cycle that it would normally be done over?
No, we haven't done any work on that at this point. We'd probably look at that as it was a little bit closer. I mean, we know approximately how many properties that would be involved.
Is it possible to have that on kind of a to-do list so that we as a council could say, okay, our portion will be $100,000 and then it will require them each to take on, we would have to borrow another $500,000, which they would take on that debt instead of the town taking on in order to provide the service. Is that possible to have that happen?
Chief Administrative Officer?
Thank you, Your Worship. With respect to that, if we're borrowing from MFA, the rates change, so you're not sure exactly, you can't give a good number until you actually are borrowing the money and you know what rate it is at.
Well, you could do it on today's rate,
Yeah.
knowing that may well change, absolutely. But
You could
it's
give
like
an
calculating
approximate
like mortgages,
cost per
Yeah.
property.
You don't know what it'll be next week, but you can still come up with a pretty reasonable number.
We did it Sawmill Road, we did it Rockcliffe. Yeah.
So it is possible to give a
Yeah.
rough.
Yes.
We've got a few of them.
It might be valuable for those people to get a letter somewhere along the line saying, hey, here's a possibility, what do you think?
Yep. And so was Councilor Mattis that? Sorry if I'm cutting you off.
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay.
I have a,
So looking at the two.
Devin, I have a couple questions as we're talking about these capital projects here.
Okay.
The first one is just around the sewer condition assessment. I know there's intention to ask for more money to supplement that budget and retender that, looking at the full scope of work. I'm just wondering if, when I read this, I was wondering if there's an opportunity here for us to maybe purchase equipment and do this internally ourselves and save money in future years, or have some control over the cost of this type of assessment. I don't know if we have the capability of it, but I thought I would ask that.
It's the equipment's fairly expensive, and you need a hydrovac truck to work with it. I'd love a hydrovac truck. You'll see me put one on the general budget. But even the cameraing, like if you hire some of the other outfits out there, sometimes they'll have a van, they'll have their computer in there, the camera systems, depending on the size of pipe that you're working with. I know there's larger municipalities than us that contract that out on a regular basis. But we don't have enough pipe to warrant, I think, all that capital costs for so many weeks of work every so often. Right now we're gathering the data, and then we'll sit on that for a while, and then after so many years we would probably think about doing it again as well. Maybe if we had a hydrovac truck and then adding a component to it at that point, maybe we could relook at that.
Sounds like we're getting a little pricey.
Yeah. And you know how much a hydrovac truck, even if we got a decent secondhand one, that's going to cost $200,000 to $300,000. So
Even if you had the hydrovac as part of a new street sweeper, it's still $600,000.
yeah, even the street sweepers aren't cheap.
No, I know, $600,000.
No, you can get a decent one for about 4 or 5.
Not with hydrovac.
We
No,
got a
the
fire
street
truck
sweeper,
and
yeah.
a hydrovac in the same.
The hydrovac, and just so that council knows, like a hydrovac truck, you could use it in a lot of, out of all the budgets. It would be used for multiple things. We've even used it for planting trees because of utilities being in, too many utilities being in an area. we'd clean our own catch basins, we would clean our own sewer pipe, do our own maintenance that way. When we found time to do it, instead of relying on contractors, so, and then digs where our backhoe can't dig in because of other utilities and other obstacles, the hydrovac truck is so much easier, and it, you don't have to excavate as much, obviously, so it's on our wish list.
Have you ever put a business case together? I mean, you're sounding like some operational savings could be associated with it. I don't know if it would ever get to a tipping point.
That's coming in the general budget, yeah, under our equipment funds, and
You're saying that.
yeah. Our, just for sewer alone, hiring our sewer contractor every year, using their services is between $30,000 and $40,000 a year.
Look forward to getting some information. Just with how tough the sewer budget is capital wise, I'm looking at a new Sandy dump and I'm looking for some rationale of why that is such a great thing to do.
That was last council's wish, to replace the Sandy dump that was taken out of Centennial Park RV. So there's no public Sandy use station in Oliver right now. So they'd asked staff to look at putting a Sandy dump in. We were thinking along Airport Road, and so I'm putting it in again. It was in last year's budget and got moved forward, and then I put it in this year's budget. Whether you guys want to carry it forward or not, it's up to you guys.
Councillor Schwarzenberg.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, when I looked at this, I was surprised at the price too, because I thought we were in the 35,000 range when we talked about it before, and now all of a sudden we're at 75,000. And maybe that's because I think we originally talked about down at the visitor center, somewhere in there.
And we talked at Public Works.
And Public Works as well, but the number I remember from last year when we said we thought this was a good idea was 35,000. And now all of a sudden we're at 75 to 85.
I believe it was 75 in last year's budget.
I don't think so.
I don't think
No,
so.
it was
Wasn't it? It was at 35?
30,000.
30,
35.
35.
Yep.
Devin?
Devin?
He's looking.
Hold on right now.
Because I need my laptop to find it.
It's, Public Works doesn't really work. I mean, you have to, it takes up a little more space than you think it does.
Yeah.
And then you have to pave it, you gotta put in the infrastructure. And time it's all said and done, I mean, $75,000 doesn't get you as much as it used to. It's amazing how,
Maybe Sandy dump 75.
75,
Well, there you go.
75.
Councillor
What
Benton.
was 35?
Just wanted you to practice that.
Yeah. Well, it was the same line, we thought it was 35.
I don't know where I got, I'm sure it was 35. But anyway, that's neither here nor there.
you were hoping it was 35.
Yeah, okay. Well,
We just
now
knew
I'm,
that the private sector could do it for 35, we wondered why the public sector cost 75.
now,
You'd be hiring the private sector to build it.
Well, it wouldn't be engineered by them.
well, now that it's 75 instead of 35, my zeal for that project has waned.
Well, and I was just gonna add that I've always wondered, like, how much of a service, how many people would we be providing a service to really when there's free Sandy dumps on either side of us? There's a couple in the city. And then
Councillor
I know it's not.
It's knocking on doors, it was a hot button with people, there is a real demand out there, I totally understand where they're coming from. I've also admired Councilor Ventimiglia. If you left the campground with a full tank and you're coming home, I'm not sure why you wouldn't stop in Osoyoos or Penticton and use the free services in those locations. I've never quite understood why they have to come home and then go back out again in order to do it. But that's just me, I'm not a camper, so
Well,
I'm not trying to defend that by any means, so.
I am a camper, and I know Midway put in one because the campground does not have one. So it's a town campground, and you go and you can dump, and that's great when you go over there. But most campgrounds have them, and I maybe the one, I'm sure if the one on the end of Tuckaloo has a sandy dump, but if it does, they do not.
No.
There's that.
And what about the other, what about?
The only one-
Desert Gem.
Desert Gem is the only one.
They do have one.
They do have one, but they
Yeah.
don't,
For their
any of the
customers.
people.
I mean, as a camper, I would just go find one. I couldn't support even 35,000. Cause I just look at it, what business is it gonna bring to town? Somebody gonna come and spend money while they're at the sandy dump? It'd be something that the Chevron might wanna put in. I've seen them at the Shells and Husky Station, and people come there and dump and they get other things. We're just gonna have a sandy dump. There is one in Trout Creek, that's in the middle of nowhere, and I hardly ever see anybody using it. I think we could find something better to spend.
Well, we can move it up.
That back truck, maybe there's a couple tires.
That's about it.
Anyway.
It can be moved into the next year.
Yep.
We can always come back for more discussion and continue to move forward until there may be a will of council or enough feedback from the public that says that yes, we absolutely want one.
Let's move it out.
It wasn't.
Yeah, it's in there. So the
He's,
consensus there, Devin, was that would be moved into 2020 for future discussion.
Along with the Sawmill Road extension sewer realignment.
He's having problems.
he's having problems?
Yes.
Yeah, he's not.
He's just
No,
typing.
He's just typing his notes, so he remembers.
Are we done with that?
Do we need to a motion to?
Yeah,
that out?
to the next year. That one's the match.
The draft budget work. Do we need a motion to move that?
No,
You don't.
not at this point in time. It'll be the motion with regards to the rates bylaws that you set, so that'll be taken out,
Okay,
prior to,
so those two items will be taken out.
yeah.
So we need to
Moved out.
The two ready.
No, just the sandy dump.
Can we, I still have one
Yep.
else go forward if you're still there.
Yep.
I'll go right back to the beginning, the solar array. It's not that, to me, it's a question of looking good versus doing good. I looked at the report, and the report says it pays back, $3,000 a year on an investment on our part of $75,000, and an investment of the granting of another $75,000. That's, to pay it all back is a 50-year payback on the life of a solar cell that has 25 years. So in essence, we would be paying, even for our portion, we would be paying $75,000 up front to save $3,000 a year, and 25 years later, we will be replacing those solar cells because they wear out. So there's no net gain at the end of that. I know it makes us look really good and it's green and all of that, and I'm not against any of that, but it's $75,000.
Councilor Schwarzenberg?
And, well, I think you have to, again, if you did the business case, you'd have to put in the fact that it does reduce, it is a greenhouse gas reducer, and we have to buy credits because we're a carbon neutral community, so it would reduce the amount of credits. I'm sure it wouldn't come up to 75,000 in your 25 years, but yet you'd have to bring that into the equation too.
Well, that's may well be, but what do we pay for those credits now?
So, yeah, so to answer Councilor Schwarzenberg, we pay, in total, the whole town, we pay $5,500 for the total credit, so the whole town. So that, all town's usage, all the town's power, all this, like, the whole town. So I would say that a very small portion of the power or whatever that we would save from the credits would be to be the offset.
Councilor Benjamin?
I do like this project for the fact that it looks good, but also that it does good. And it said, from what I saw here, that they're looking for total grant funding. So if that's the case, we get money and do it.
75 grand, 75 is it?
Okay, well, in the actual description, it says that we're looking for total grant funding.
Description.
Total
think in the past, there has been some projects with 100% funding. Now, whether we find that again,
Summerland just got that this year, didn't
There's been a whole bunch of them.
yeah, I'm
they?
not,
But for
I'm
to
not
do
quite
with the
sure.
solar array, similar, like really similar.
I mean, well, we'd have to look at more grants available out there, but it's rare that you get 100% grant, but there are some out there.
I mean, even if the
Especially for
numbers
sewer
are
projects.
approved, it would work, but the way they are now, it just doesn't make sense.
That's just.
Oh, I like the idea too, but it's about looking good versus doing.
Well, we wiped out the sand dump and that pays for our half, so.
Okay, so on an overall level, this is what I wanted to show council, is that on an overall level, we'll be borrowing, if we complete all these projects in this time frame, we will be borrowing roughly $1.16 million over the next 5 years. And how that looks is that in 2020, when we have to borrow for the 2020, when we have to borrow for the Northwest sector sewer upgrades, and then we have to borrow for these two projects in here. So 2021, we have to do that. That's an increase of 17,600 on an annual basis. And then in 2022 and 2023, when we borrow 474,000 and 335,000, that's another 33,000 a year for 20 years. Sorry, it says 25, but it's for 20 years. And 2023 is another 30,000. That just the debt alone over the next 5 years is looking at an 8% increase over those 5 years. So if we average that out, that 1.63% is just for the debt costs that we're going to incur over the next 5 years. That's an increase every single year just for the debt financing. So that's shown here on the bottom of page 52. So this is the average. And if we did it every single year, we would have an incremental revenue to pay off the total loan payments. And that alone, so that's 8% over the next 5 years. And then you look at our sewer capital reserve, you'll see that in 2021, we're at $500,000 in the hole. And that's with all the borrowing. So right now we're at close to $1 million in the opening for the sewer reserve. So if we do these projects and we continue to fund them the way that they're currently shown, we are going to be in a significant hole by the end of 2023, even by the end of 2021, if we don't continue to use that three-pronged approach, make the sewer budget more sustainable. So on an overall budget, I don't think we can talk about the projects, but unless we can figure out the sewer as a whole to be more sustainable, in the near coming future, we'll either have to increase the rates by a significant portion, or we're going to have to continue to defer these projects year after year.
So to carry on with the solar array, because I don't think we've finished with that yet, ultimately what Devin just explained to us is that $75,000 will end up in our debt down the road. We'll actually be borrowing an extra $75,000 in order to put in a solar array that doesn't save us a dime.
Does the town of Boulder apply for a CARE grant? And what gets done with that money? I asked that because like in the city of Kelowna, that goes into an energy carbon reserve. So we use it to make the business case, because it's free money basically that we put back into energy conservation measures or greenhouse gas reduction projects. So if we can get a grant and then we can use some of that money, you know, that makes the business case, and we're doing something green, but it's not costing taxpayers any money.
So are you talking about the climate action,
right?
The CARE?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that for us offsets the credits that we buy. So we 5,500 and we buy 5,500 to offset credits. Is what we
It's a
do.
wash.
Because we are a green community, but we've just purchased the offsetting credits with the care of funds that we get.
So we're buying credits instead of doing something that's gonna reduce our greenhouse gas emissions?
Correct. Yeah.
That doesn't sound quite green.
Yeah, no, I can definitely understand that. It was a thing that council of the past had said that we want to be carbon neutral, or we want to be have zero impact carbon, so we buy the credits, but that's what we use the CARE report, the CARE funding is for. And it's a very small amount, like I said, roughly $5,500.
It could grow if we put it in a bank account for a few years.
Oh, absolutely, yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Councilor Rice?
Thank you. I'm not exactly sure who I'm directing this to, I think probably to the CEO. In the our weekly emails that we just received, there was information about the Investing in Canada infrastructure program. And this seemed like something that might be able to fall under that umbrella. I don't know if anyone's looked into that specifically.
I do believe we have looked at that, and we have some other projects that we were looking at for that funding, is that correct? For the infrastructure?
I believe we were like, one was, I thought we were trying to get the diffusers, and then you wanted roads, the second phase of station.
Yeah, but I think we went to sewer over the roads,
Mm-hmm. Just not that sewer project.
yeah.
So it's been allocated.
We were looking at going for the diffusers, underneath that project.
So again, I'm asking council, do we want to spend $75,000 or borrow $75,000 ultimately to put in solar array? That won't save us a dime. Yeah, I know it's hard, everybody wants to look good and be green, but we have a fiscal responsibility here.
I think, I would struggle with that. I think it's a good idea. It's tough when there's no business case there, for sure. I would like to have a look at what we do with that CARE grant, though. Have that money available to be used to work projects like this, or other green initiatives, or energy reduction projects, or, I think that would be something. Then, you know,
I'm open to that, but that's not today. And I'm just asking, where does this stay on this particular budget? Do we move it out for another year? Because it has been moved out 3 years in a row now because we've been unable to get grant funding.
mhm.
It doesn't hurt to try to get grant
look for
funding.
grant.
It does, because this costs us $75,000 in borrowing. It does hurt to try.
Yeah, if you get the funding, usually you'll have to have a council resolution that the other part of the funding is available. You have to have money for that.
Right, but you don't actually spend it unless you get the grant.
No, but if you apply for the grant,
You get it.
and you get the grant, then you want to move forward, you have to come up with that 75,000. So unless you're, like Councilor Mattis is saying, unless you're willing to commit to spending 75,000, then why bother moving forward with the grant application?
And I'm more than willing to say, yes, apply for the grant, and if it comes, we can always amend our budget. That can always be done.
Okay.
But I'm just saying that today, it should not be in the budget. Certainly, staff can be directed to apply, but the budget can be changed.
CAO.
So,
I'm just gonna defer over to Devin, because I do believe he's gonna say what I'm going to say also.
Okay.
So, go ahead, Devin.
yeah, so that's sort of putting the cart before the horse. So for all capital grants and stuff that you want to put forward, they want to see that it's actually approved, that you're willing to put up that money. So you can't have it that way. So you can't apply for a grant and then amend your budget. You have to have it approved in your budget and then apply for it. You can't. You need to be able to show that, hey, council is willing to do this project because we like grant funding and we're willing to do it. If you can't say, if we get the money, then we'll do it. You have to have it in your can definitely change the source of funding to be 100% funding, and then if we don't get it, then we're not gonna do the project. But there isn't a significant amount of those grants out there right now.
I'd even,
I would just
I'd
hate for it
even
to
live with
drop.
75.
Well, I would just hate for it to drop off and then in a year and a half, you go, oh my god, that was the perfect grant, but not allowed to apply for it.
Won't be a year and a half, it would have to be in this year.
Like, whenever, I just would hate for it to drop off.
We can definitely change and amend the source of funding. So like as you see on the right hand side of page 51, so you see how it's 75 and 75? So that's just 50% because that's usually what the grants are out there for this project. So if you want to amend and say you want at least a 75% project in order to make this project go, then we can amend that. But then you're also saying that anything less than 75% we're not gonna accept and we're not gonna do the project. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So we can definitely move it out and then say change the source funding to be whatever percentage you want, and then just know that if we don't get that percentage of source funding, it's not going to continue.
I just have one more question because I'm still trying to figure out how this works. So if we've had this way for 3 years, so we've had it 50-50 split, 75,000 grant funding, 75,000 reserve, and we had it.
Started at 300.
Sorry?
It started at 700 and then went to 300 and then went to 150 this year.
But I guess my question is just if it's been there for 3 years and we've never spent the money that we say we're going to spend, I still don't understand how that.
Because we've never been
It's part of
successful
the
getting a grant.
it's part of the opening.
I understand that.
That you see here is part of the opening amount, so it's included in here. So yeah, it's never been spent, but it's already included in your opening balances. So
I
every
guess
year it's
but the
refreshed.
question is, okay, so what happened to the money that didn't get spent last year? It's still there.
It's still in here, yeah. So you still see that it's there, but as you can see, there's using those projects and doing these projects, we're going to be in a deficit. So we really need to prioritize what projects we want to do and when to do them.
CEO.
Thank you, Your Worship. In the past years, I do believe that this project went forward with 100% grant funding. It's never, I think this is the first year that it's coming with the reserve, or possibly the second year, but it has usually been looking for 100% grant funding.
And that's why it's probably written the way it was written, because they
Which is
probably
what
cut
it
and
says in
pasted
there.
that.
Yeah, that's exactly what it says. They're looking for a grant to fund the
Yeah.
total project of 150,000.
Yeah. So we were always asking for 100% and we just keep dropping the amount down.
Yeah. And then this year we did
To get any.
grant 75% and reserve 75,000, 75,000. We split it in half.
I appreciate it as a valuable project, but when I look at the other projects that we have to borrow money for, I would have to weigh that against those other projects. What do our citizens, what do the taxpayers need? Or do we need a solar array up there where we borrow 75,000? Or do we need new sewer pipes on Sawmill Road where we have no sewer and borrow 75,000 there?
So
That's what it comes down to.
do we amend them so that we go forward based on the contingency of 100% grant?
I would even go 75, because at least then you're getting payback.
Yeah, I do 75. I'm good with that.
Change.
75%.
So you,
So
75% grant.
Yeah.
25% our money and 75% grant.
okay. And then do you want to move the project to next year or this year, or do you want to keep it the same?
Yeah, keep it the same.
Yeah.
What the heck just happened?
It just went down. Oh, I've not seen what you did.
Oh, undo.
Hit undo.
I haven't touched it.
It's you.
I've got it, Devin.
We've got notes here too.
25%. There we go.
There she
There she is.
It was close. For me, I have no other questions in this year's.
I have no other questions.
I have no continue on, Kevin?
Okay, so with that being said, and obviously showing, because those are the two problems that I'm really talking about, is the capital funding envelope and the debt funding envelope. So with that, you see that there's significant changes that we need to make. So our operating is good. We don't need to increase in our rates due to operating, but as you can see from our capital funding, we need a significant increase, and then also in our debt financing, we need over the next 5 years 1.63% every single year in order to finance that amount. So that's sort of what I tried to outline in the next couple scenarios. So the scenarios are, this is the worst case scenario. So this is a 0% increase, this is what has been essentially shown to you today. And then the next one is a 2% increase. And then you'll obviously see that the sewer reserve amount is getting better in 2019. And then when we have to start making payments, debt payments in 2020, you see that this amount gets eaten into a little bit, but then it's still not as low as it was in Plan 1, which is at the end of 2023 is only 30,000 being put in. And the next one has, at the end of 2023, you have 52,000. But again, this is showing a 2% increase this year and then a 2% increase for the next 4 years after that due to CPI increases. And then the last fund, or the last scenario, is the 4% increase. And then this really doesn't show how good it could be, because obviously it's a 4% increase and then drops to 2% after it. But if we have a steady and stable increase over the next 5 years, I think that we can try to maintain that goal of being sustainable for this fund, right? Because you want each of the individual funds to be self-sustaining and not having to be subsidized from other places. So you want the water fund to be self-sustaining, you want the sewer fund to be self-sustaining, and then you want the general fund to be self-sustaining and not have to be subsidized by property taxes or other means in order to be able to provide the service. So Plan 3, again, a 4% increase in sewer would probably be the bare minimum that I would recommend, just due to the funding envelope and the future capital, future debt payments that we're going to have to make if we continue down this line of those capital projects. Like I said, this is probably the scariest budget or the scariest fund presented to you, just due to not only the amount of capital projects, but the level amount that we're taking out of the sewer reserve on an annual basis. Any questions on the different scenarios and what gets changed? It's really just, nothing really changes in the revenues or expenditures, but what really changes is the amount that we put into our sewer reserves, which is shown on this line right here.
Councilor Schwarzenberger?
Devin, the Plan 3 is 4% this year and 4% for each of the next 4 years, correct?
No, the way that I've, oh shoot, that's the way that it shows, but if you look at this, it is.
That's what I thought.
I read this, I didn't see that.
It was supposed to drop, but this obviously shows a little bit of the stabilization that I was talking about, right? So you see that we're at 143, and then even though we have debt payments, we're still putting away more in 2023 than we are in 2019, which is obviously a good sign. So yes, this is Plan 3 is 4% for all the years remaining, but remember, the budgets get approved on an annual basis, so you'll get a set fee every single year.
Yep.
Thank you, Councilor Schwarzenberger.
No problem. These things jump out at me. What can I say?
Councilor Madison?
I will move the recommendation that council approve the draft operating capital budgets as attached to November 9th, 2018-19 sewer operating capital budgets report, and that council direct staff to prepare sewer user rates the sewer tax rate bylaws based on a 4% increase from 2018 due to operational capital funding and future debt obligation needs, with any generated surplus being transferred to sewer reserves.
Seconder, Councilor Schwarzenberger. Call the question.
Discussion.
Oops, sorry, discussion. CA.
Just some clarification on that recommendation. We're talking to approving the draft sewer and operating capital budgets as attached to the report. We have done some minor amendments to it.
As amended.
As amended.
I'll reword that to say as amended.
And I will second it as amended.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's
We didn't actually do that.
We're amending the
The last bucket.
Any discussion? Before I call the question, is there any discussion? Call the question, those in favor? Those opposed? Motion carried, unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council.
What's that?
I don't think we did.
Did you have the last one?
No.
Did something.
No, we passed the recommendation as presented.
No, but I know if we amend the budget, the recommendation has to say as amended.
Yeah, because they were changing a couple of things.
Oh, okay.
Can we
Maybe
go
they have
down?
the
I just
capital
wanna see.
items that were changed in the budget, yeah.
What you changed on there, on the capital?
Did we change anything in the
I
water
don't think
budget?
we did anything in
In the water budget? Let me just check.
What we did was we took the
pump.
pump out and put it in capital.
We took.
Hester
I'm
Creek.
sorry, put it into capital.
Moved it from
So Dave's
operating.
question is, should that not have been passed as amended then? Or is it?
As we just did now.
No, we don't have to do anything as amended because we're not, like, this is just a resolution so that we can set the rates. Like, the bylaw is the one that we have to approve. Like, the rates is what we have to approve in order to carry into our 5-year financial plan. So any changes that you want us to make, we'll make it, and then we'll present the information and the bylaw at the next council meeting.
So we didn't
The
work
bylaw
on
is
the
we
amendments
have to.
either.
I just,
Okay. Item K2, 2019 Fire Department budget. Refer this back
Okay,
to this
so
CAO or Devin.
thank you. I'll pass it over to Devin. Because he's ready to go.
Yeah.
He's ready.
I'm thinking he's getting hungry.
I apologize.
It's only 9 o'clock in Lethbridge.
We could pause again.
Yeah, it's late, it's my bedtime here. So there isn't a lot to talk about on this budget. Really, these two items that I've outlined in the report is that wages have increased by 2% CPI, which has been customary in prior reports, and the OIB contribution, because we changed our agreement with them, there is a smaller contribution that we budgeted for in 2019 on how their amount gets paid, so it's closer to what we anticipate to get in 2019. And overall, their budget is very, very consistent with the prior year. And then their funding that we are going to be doing for any of their capital projects are going to be coming out of the reserve that we've set up with them, that we put from our surplus of this fire reserve every single year. So overall, there isn't much to talk about. It's maybe a small increase overall in the operational budget, but I still think that we're getting exceptional value for the service that's provided, and because we have great partners in the fire department, we're getting significant value for this operating budget.
Any questions?
Any questions? So
Hang on, Devin.
the shareable budget.
Excuse me, Devin.
Devin?
Devin?
Oh,
Can you-
someone talking?
Yeah, I am. Can you hear me?
Sorry,
Yeah.
you're good.
Thank you very much. Because we have two new counselors on staff, can you please, take some time and explain the Sherrill Fire Department's costs and our costs so that they have an understanding of that part of it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So with that, we have two different partners with the fire department. So one is the OIB. The OIB gets charged essentially a flat fee for their service, where the Oliver Fire Protection District, Oliver Fire Protection District in combination with an agreement with them, we allocate the shareable costs that we have between them, and then we base the shareable portion based on assessment. So we look at our assessment, we look at their assessment, and then however that is prorated. So if we have a higher assessment based on the total, historically it's been 51%, 49%, where we pay 51% and they pay 49% of the shareable costs. So the shareable costs include, on here it's page 65, the fixed operating. So you have the insurances, the officers pay, practices, all those amounts. So this is a paid on call fire department. So they are not, we do not have any full-time staff. They are essentially all volunteer, and then they get paid for practices and paid for when they're actually completing the duty of firefighting or any other service that they provide. So again, they have fixed operating costs, which again, if you look at 2018 budget compared to this, it's very similar. Depreciation again is a non-funded expense, so we don't need to worry about that. Variable costs, and so that's the materials, the equipment that is purchased on an annual basis, and then we combine all those three together. So our fixed, our depreciation, and our variable costs, we come up with a shareable portion, and from that shareable portion is offset from our other funding partners. So OIB is offset against that, and then we come up to a portion that is shared. So what happens is there's roughly 177,000 after the OIB's revenue contribution is considered a shareable cost that we need to allocate. And so as you see, the OIB Protection District gives us 87, and we pay the 90,000 in the 2019 budget. And then from there's also some non-shared costs that are just town-owned costs, and so that increases our total cost for the fire department for operating at 112,000. So because we have great partners, like I mentioned, and a great structure on how these services are shared, we end up paying 112,000 for our fire department, even though the costs are significantly higher than that.
Which is the cost of one paid fire.
Pretty good value.
Yeah.
For sure. Any questions?
Essentially.
I'll move to my recommendation. Move that council accepts the budget documents for information to be carried forward to the general budget discussion.
Councilor Morales, seconder. Councilor Price. Any further discussion or call a question? Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Seeing no members in the audience to ask questions, we'll move to adjournment. I'd like to request a motion to adjourn the meeting. So moved. Councilor Schwarzenberg. Councilor Mattis. Question? In favor? Motion carried. Thanks, Devin.
Nice.
Thanks, Devin.
Thank you very much, guys. Appreciate it.
How do you spell that?
How much heavy a case do you guys have?
It's cool.
Nice. I'm kind of a little bit jealous.
Is it much different?
No, it's fine.
My iPad just looks at it all the time.
Yeah,
Probably, so I
Can I leave this on your?
thank you, Devin.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye, Devin.
See,
Hi, Devin.
My SIM card in there.
I think that